meeting to order. In case anyone hasn't noticed, there's food on the side, so feel free to help yourself buffet style. With that being said, I will move on to reading the Indigenous Solidarity Statement. So we'd like to acknowledge that Concordia University is on the traditional territory of the Ganyan-Gehaga, a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst nations. The Concordia Student Union recognizes and respects the Ganyan-Gehaga as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters on which we meet today. So the roll call sheet should be going around, so just remember to sign it. On that note, for some public shaming, there's 3 counselors who haven't given me their student IDs, and I need them quick. That's Jeremy, Kemi, and Eamon. So if you guys could forward that to me, that would be excellent. That being said, we can move on to roll call and excusal of absences. So I received some requests for excusal from counselors, most of whom will just be missing part of the meeting. Julia and Devin will be missing part of the meeting as they have another meeting to attend. Jeremy requested excusal from the whole meeting, and Alienor as well. So if council would like to entertain their excusals. Yes, Kemi? Okay. Do we have a second? Eamon? Any discussion? Yes. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your placards. 12, all those opposed, 0, and any abstentions. Perfect, so I will notify them of their requests for excusal. There were some counselors who missed the mandatory consent training, which counts as 2 excusals. Some were excused last meeting, some were not. So if you would like to be excused, I suppose you know who you are if you didn't receive an excusal last meeting because you were either absent or anything like that. Now's the chance, so I'll open the floor if anyone would like to request their excusal, or else it's 2 absences. Okay, so if no one wants to request that, that is good. So we can move on to approval of the agenda. So anything sent to me after Friday is not on the agenda, so even if you send me an email, just remember to move to add it currently. I'll go around this way. Yes, Ali?
The apology, I guess, like, I don't know where to put that. Oh.
It's being covered in the SUDS point.
Oh, it's me? Okay,
yeah.
Fine. Yeah, we're going to update on all of it.
Gabby?
I'd like to add a point to appointments for Loyola Committee.
All right. There was a motion to table that until after the by-elections last meeting. Would you like to bring it back anyways?
Yeah.
Awatif?
I'd like to add appointments to appointments.
All right. Rowan?
I'd like to pull both the finance and sustainability executive reports and place them as separate points under new business standard.
Okay. They'll go at the end, as we usually do with the reports. Moving along. Yes, Layla?
Can I see CSL appointments?
All right. Can do that. Moving along. Yes, Sue?
I have a motion for the CEO's payment.
Okay, I'll add that under substantive. Moving along, Rory?
I'd like to add a new point under new business to substantive conflict of interest.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to add util in presentation and substantive.
All right, we can do that. So 1 presentation, 1.
But just that the presenter is not here.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how we could maybe go back to it at another time.
We can unofficially table it until they show up. So that is good. That is good. All right, is there anything else to be added to the agenda? Ahmed, I know you have something to add.
No, I'm looking at the mobilization.
Yes. Okay.
So, AVEC appointment, we have...
Yeah, oh, I'll get to it after, yeah. So just AVEC Mobilization and AVEC Community Action Fund to add to the agenda. Okay, is there anything else to be added, modified, removed, anything like that? All right, could somebody just, well, sorry, I'll just do it. We'll just take out approval of the minutes as well. Corey just had some technical issues, so they'll be submitted at the next meeting, if that's all right with council. So I will do that. Okay, so if there's nothing further, I'll just need a motion to approve the agenda and all items under consent. Rory? Okay, we have a second. Veronica. All those in favor, please raise your placards. 11, all those opposed? And any abstentions? None. Perfect. So with that, we'll keep the presentation until the speaker gets here and move to a, oh, sorry, actually, sorry, I forgot to send you the amended agenda. I'll just amend it and send it out, so if you'll give me 2 seconds. There we go, so that is, sorry, it says the 3rd, it's supposed to say the 8th, but I'm sure we can get over that. So that's the agenda added to the group. So with that, we can move on to the next point, which is 6A, Sexual Violence Working Group, and that's Layla.
Yes, so there, was that added under appointments?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there's following a meeting with the admin, there's a working group being formed specifically to discuss any feedback regarding the sexual violence policy, specifically with regard to the recommendations made under our turn, which council signed on to a few weeks ago. So there are a few spots available in this working group that Asma and I will be taking on as far as exec positions because we've been one working on our turn and we have the time to work on this project. But there's a seat available for a councillor, and at this time I'd like to nominate Michaela to take this seat, given that, not to motivate her, but given that she's worked on some of this policy already and is familiar with what's being done. And I just want to put it out there that this, just because there's only one seat on this working group does not mean that there's not space to have other conversations with other councillors. This is like quite a specific scenario with administration, and there can be plenty of other conversations beyond the 3 people who would be sitting on this working group from council.
Do you consent to the nomination? Yes. Okay. Is there any discussion to be had regarding the nomination to the Sexual Violence Working Group? Okay, could I just get an official motion, please, just to appoint, yeah, Layla, go ahead.
I move to appoint Michaela to the sexual violence working group.
Okay, do we have a second? Veronica. So if there's no discussion, all those in favor, please raise your placards. 12, all those opposed, none, and any abstentions? 1. Perfect. So Michaela, you are appointed to the Sexual Violence Working Group. Is there any more discussion to be had on this agenda point? Okay, so if not, Laurent has graced us with his presence once more. So if everyone's okay with that, we can move back to the presentation. Utsel, are you ready to present?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So I'll give the floor to Laurent.
Thank you. Do we have a presentation?
We do not today.
Okay.
It wasn't requested.
All right.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
I mean, you just want to see my wonderful PowerPoint presentation that I prepared for you.
Can you send it?
Sure.
Yep, yeah, if you send it to me, I'll disseminate it in the, to councilors.
I'll send it afterwards. All right, well, should we wait for your general coordinator to step back in?
Oh.
He might be looking for me. Hasn't seen that I got here.
If we're waiting, could we send the presentation in advance so we can follow while you speak?
Could
Yes.
you do that?
It's
I
on
went to.
my-
As far as my experience experience 2 days ago with this room, you can still use the projector without requesting it.
We can try. The only thing is that IT costs money. So
Not
if you
this
need,
one.
okay,
Not this one, because this one is already plugged here.
okay. If you know how to do it, by all means, go right ahead.
You want to take the PDF?
Yeah, sure.
It's on the key.
Oh, okay. Well, we can try to see if this works because last time we tried it.
Well, if you want to send it anyway.
Okay, that works.
And then you just got to
Oh, wow, thank you.
The sexual violence work.
Yeah, that one's done.
Done. There's a bunch of
Right, but like, okay.
So, which one is it? Sorry.
It's today's date, 2017, 11/08.
Oh, 11. Thank you.
It's projecting already. Yeah, this one is good.
We might just want to use this one. Let me see if it's working.
Okay, I'll send out the document, so just in case this doesn't work, you'll all have something to follow along with.
Please don't look at all the slides right away because I have some like
Surprises.
surprises.
Okay. We can try for the last time with this. Try it. The last time I did it was strict connect.
It does recognize the connection. It's it looks cool, it's fine. Yeah. Thank you. I don't want to keep it waiting too long. Alright, we're gonna do this old school. Please take slide 1 of the PowerPoint that's been handed out. So I think by now most of you know who I am. My name is Laurent. I'm with UTIL, CSU's development partner for the CSU housing project. I've had the chance to keep council posted about the advancement of the project in the last years, so you probably have seen my face before. Moving on to slide 3. So you remember the project. Today my objective is to give you the latest news, including some stuff that even your general coordinator doesn't know yet, and also talk about some minor updates to the sheet that allow the project to keep moving forward. So slide 5, moving on to the project's funding situation. So keep in mind that the total cost of the project stands at around 14 million. Just today, next slide, we had the confirmation that the mortgage insurance certificate has been emitted, which is almost half of the funding of the project that's just been confirmed. So right now, next slide, you'll see that 13 out of the $14 million of the project cost are confirmed and attached. So we're really close to completing the budget. The last partner for the last million is already identified, is already in very, very advanced talks. They just need to go to their board to approve the final terms and really close that, which would complete the entire budget. Next slide. You will also see in the document that demolition of on the site has been completed or nearly completed. If you remember correctly, in this specific location used to be an abandoned funeral home. Now there is just flat land, which is perfect, except that we're going to need to dig it all out because it's contaminated. But at least there's no building in the way for the project. So that was the first step. Next step will be decontamination of the soil, and then foundations are poured and the building rises. In the next slide, you will see the current external, the latest external form of the building. We have had a major breakthrough in the construction permit, which is the first thing you need to do before you can actually start construction, obviously. So the project has been approved by the Borough of the Plateau Montreal at the beginning of October, which was a very significant step. Now they just need to approve the choice of the textures on the outside, so the color of the bricks and the color of the cladding and stuff like that. And that's a lot of back and forth because there's a lot of very technical elements involved. But we're very close, and hopefully the result will be pretty, even though a lot of the final elements are in the hands of the Borough of Montreal, the Borough of Montreal. So once the facade is completed, we will be moving forward with the final plans and the RFP, the request for proposals from contractors, which will be one of the big steps in confirming the construction budget and moving forward with that. Now, all of this has been going according to plan, except it's not exactly the plan we were wishing for. So normally, all of these things should have been done in August or September if we wanted to move forward with our ideal scenario, which was to deliver next summer. And this is something we consulted with your executive team about to see, well, what types of risks were we ready to take to push the project forward as fast as possible. And the last months have showed that it was not possible to go as fast as we wanted. Because a lot of the things that need tying, for example, a construction permit, were completely outside of our control because you need the borough to approve the project. So now the deadlines have been revised. Everything that has happened in the last months has been behind schedule. Even the demolition was super complicated because there's a wall of concrete blocks that is still tied to the neighboring building, and that requires very delicate work to remove without breaking the neighbor's wall. So there's a lot of little details like that that I don't want to bore you with, but that we're handling, and that now that we are not under pressure to meet a very, very stringent deadline, we can afford to handle in cheaper ways and with ways that have less impact on the project and its rents. So yeah, so we've been. So that brings me to slide 13 in the PDF. We've concerted with your exec to avoid very risky procedures, which can sometimes work, but sometimes not. And considering the project really prioritizes affordability over glamour or, in this case, speed, we've been taking a more prudent approach, which basically brings me to tell you, and I think most of you are already aware, but the current delivery target is May 2019. So this puts us at the latest time that was allowed in the term sheet in a two-phase project. So we are making this now the target goal, we still have, this allows us a lot more margin if there are other bad surprises, which there will be. That's almost certain with a construction project. So on the next slide and the next slide, so the term sheet has been updated to reflect this, to make sure that everyone is on the same page. Basically, the term sheet initially provided for the construction of 2 buildings, one after the other. Now we're on the deadline of the second, which puts us at an opening of the building in around May 2019, which has the added advantage of allowing your members to visit the building before they actually move in. Whereas now we were looking at September 2018, which would have meant that construction finished exactly at the time where people were moving in. So there's a lot of advantages to pushing it back a year, or 8 months in this case, even though we weren't thrilled that means the project will take a bit longer. And also for your information, generally delays to a construction project occur some costs, because there's a cost to owning land for a year without doing anything, but we've already reorganized the budget and succeeded in reducing the land tax at the borough, at the city, to absorb all of that, so that won't have an impact on the budget. And finally, on slide 16, I just wanted to also update you on the other stuff that's going on with the housing project. So, as I said the last time I spoke with some of you, we were recruiting this fall. We are recruiting for the provisional committee, so the housing committee that's composed of 6 CSU members. Now 4 new people will be coming in the next 2 weeks, I think. And the next steps are that now that we've sort of finalized some of the management partnerships, we'll be able to move forward with Hojo to see how they can best collaborate to make sure that the housing is made available to the students that need it the most, and that we have some sort of ongoing Hojo involvement in the tenant selection process. And that's it. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. As usual, we try to keep the information flowing freely. So if you have any thoughts or curiosities, even on the very boring technical details, happy to answer them.
There's a question here.
Yep.
Yeah, so you've mentioned that twice, that the details are boring, but I guess I feel they are important, and there's a bit of lack of specifics. I'm just wondering, when you talk about these risky procedures, is there a project plan in place? Do you have a project management professional on staff? When you talk about risk management and these costs for deadline extensions, what's the risk management plan? What's the risk management budget? What are these things? What's the chance that they're going to occur? What they're going to cost? Has this been provided to council in the past? Is this something that we need to be aware of? It's great to say, going well, permits have been delayed, but like, what's the project plan that shows that you connect these things together? Where's your flex time? Where's your extra capacity?
So all of these things are obviously planned for. We have a very tight risk management procedure because this is a project with a lot of, obviously, risks. So contingency planning is really one of the things we spend most of our time on. The current deadline allows us multiple months of flex time and adjustment, which was exactly why we wanted to choose the less risky approach, because a lot of stuff in a construction project you can't control. So we can't control, but we can quantify the delays and the average delays that such projects occur. So we tried to go as much as possible with a Six Sigma approach. So like every possible delay is accounted for within a wide margin of error. And this is validated by a seasoned professional that is a consultant on our team.
A certified PMP?
No, because that's not necessary in the construction field. What we need is someone with years of construction experience. That person has 40 years of construction management experience. So everything is validated, cross-checked, and of course all of the professionals are involved in these discussions, so you can be certain that the project is involving architects, engineers, and all of the all of these people that have these very specific fields of expertise, and we make sure to tie them all together and bring them to the table.
Okay, there's a question from Peter as well, and I'll put you back on the list.
Yes, just a question, because you mentioned a couple of times saying that if there won't be delays and stuff like that. So just want to say, know in terms of that, if that thing do happen, which I mean technically won't, but if at some point, if this kind of thing do happen, do you guys have any situation how to resolve those kind of issues and all that?
Absolutely, because things have happened. Just to give you an idea, for example, on the construction permit, which was a big issue, we had to pull political pressure to make sure that moved forward. Everything has, we've been trying to create a network of partners around the project, and as you could see in the funding slide, there's a lot of people involved outside of just CSU in this project who need it to work, and I'm talking involved financially. So these are all eyes on the ball, and we've been planning, like I said, for contingencies. So, for example, the delay at the target deadline at May 2019 is a comfortable deadline, and we still have a few months margin of error if ever that were not to come, because most of your members lease between July and September, and this is something that we validated. So the real deadline is July, and the real ultimate deadline is September 1st. So there's a lot of backup scenarios for sure.
Okay, thank you, Rory.
I guess leading off my last question, I guess I wasn't really satisfied. All major construction companies have project managers on staff, certified project managers on staff, and when it's something this expensive, they have a certified risk management professional who does a risk analysis and a certified risk plan. That's how you get insurance for a project like this. Saying that you have a seasoned construction professionals doesn't mean that those construction professionals have the education or background to provide a project plan or a risk assessment. So they can be experienced and they can have that expertise to be intuitive, but I'm concerned when this is 14 million and you talk about, yes, we have a plan for this, yes, we have a plan for that, yes, we've looked at it, yes, we've looked at it. You've looked at it, but you have no certifying authority behind that. Why don't you have a project management professional on staff?
Because the development budget does not allow it. That's the short answer. But the truth is, and this is why I want to be clear that there's a lot of people at the table, the truth is everyone is doing risk control. The mortgage insurance certificate that I was mentioning comes from CMHC. CMHC has been very thorough in their due diligence on the project, as have all the other investment partners in the project. And everyone wants this to work, everyone wants this to be affordable, and do not, trust me when I say that we answer to a lot of people. First and foremost, CSU, of course, because this project is for your members. So this is why I speak to Omar more frequently than I speak to CMHC, for example. But it has taken 6 months for them to analyze the project and come with the answer today. This being said, I'm happy to discuss risk management and our management tools. If you want to swing by the office, we're right next door. And we're not really specific about certification, but we are specific about tools and processes. And this is something that we're happy to discuss in further detail.
Are there any more questions or discussion for Laurent? Okay, so if not, I'd like to thank you very much for coming, and thank you for sending us your presentation.
Sure.
Thank you. Colleagues, pleasure.
Talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, yes.
Point of order. Is
Yep.
there a motion for this presentation?
No, it's just a
Anything
presentation.
related to this at all?
Nope.
Yes.
Any decisions
Oh.
that CSU needs to make?
Oh, sorry, my apologies. Yeah, it's a term sheet later.
So we have a motion. We're going to be making a decision on something related to this. Once we get that decision up in front of us, are we able to keep that on so we can ask him questions? Can we move things around?
If
I
anyone
don't
would
feel
like
comfortable making a decision and having unanswered. Like, if there's questions that come up in the process of that discussion, it might be useful to have them say.
If council's amenable to it, if somebody wants to move the motion, that's perfectly acceptable. Just also, because people keep sending me presentation and motion separately, you can do a motion after a presentation, just to let you know. The agenda's just arranged that way for convenience. So don't feel awkward sending me presentation and motion at the same time. It can be done. I'm not sure if that's why this keeps happening. But if anyone wants to move the motion, go ahead. Yes, Rory?
Well, I can't change the agenda, so.
No, just move. It's relevant. You can move the motion, and we can just not move anything later on. Yes, Julia?
I move to break Robert's rules.
You don't need to do that. We don't, okay, because when we're on the topic, you can just move the motion, like because it's relevant to UTSIL, and then when we get to point B of 9, we can just skip through that. Yes, Omar?
I move to approve the updated term sheet
There we
that
go.
UTSIL has provided.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Julia? Your motivation, Omar?
I think the term sheet obviously was approved by council already, given all the conditions and the terms and conditions that are still in it. Nothing has changed other than just the dates, given the delays in the project.
Okay. Is there any discussion to be had on the term sheet? Yes, Rory?
If this is it's not an updated contract, is it?
Yeah.
It is an updated contract.
Yeah.
So council is consenting to adjust this contract
That's right.
for $14 million program.
Well,
Okay, do you want to respond
my
to
I'm
it?
not
question-
sure if
My
that
real,
answers your question.
Okay.
my real
Go
comment or
ahead.
question about this is, if we're making a decision on adjusting a contract for something of this size or nature, I for one would like to call personal privilege and have a copy in English. I'm sure CSU can afford to have it, or UTIL can afford to have it translated.
You have, sorry,
Do
can I
you want to answer?
Yeah, well, there is a version of the original contract in English. The revised version has not been translated because it did not seem to be a big issue for CSU. But all of the translations have been discussed in English as well.
Great.
That's all I can say.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion to be had on the point? Okay, yes, Rowan? Okay, so if not, the motion is still on the table. So all those in favor of approving the revised contract, please raise your placards. 10. All those opposed? 1. And any abstentions? 1, 2, 3. All right.
I'd like my position noted.
Yes, absolutely. So just note. Oh, 4 abstentions. My apologies. Sorry, there's people hiding here. Yep, and Dylan's noted as abstention. All right. Is there any more discussion to be had on the term sheet? Yes, Rory?
Because this is a previously approved contract, does it not qualify for our rules about 2/3 majority? Financially speaking, if it's an adjustment to an already agreed to contract?
I would say
This is a point of parliamentary inquiry, but
I would say no. I can look into it as well, but I would say no, but it passes with a 2/3 majority anyways.
be transparent.
Yeah, in my opinion, it would not. All right, are there any more questions? Okay, so if not, we can move, well, thank you, Laurent, for staying around. Okay, so if not, we can move on to 6B, which is Appointments Committee. And Veronica, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so we have 1 seat open for appointments. We don't meet too often anymore. Essentially, we just appoint student at-larges to different CSU bodies. Yeah, it's a fun committee. I bring good food, so please join.
Would anyone like to appoint themselves to the Appointments Committee? Once again, remember there's new counselors coming in a week, in 2 meetings, not a week. So if nobody gets appointed, it'll just show up next time. Okay, so if no one would like to appoint themselves now, that will come back next meeting. Okay, so now we can move on to the Loyola Committee. Gabby.
Yes, once again, we still have 1 seat open. Right now, it is Peter, Rowan, Charlotte, and I. We have a lot of really fun things prepared for the winter semester, which is what we're working on right now. And we still meet once a month, but given the G Lounge conversations, we're going to be meeting twice a month. So please join.
Peter?
I want to say one thing, because right now Charlotte is on sick leave, so we only to me and Rowan right now, and Gabriel only. So yeah, if someone can go on, would be great.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone who'd like to nominate themselves to the Loyola Committee? Okay, so if not that as well, we'll come back next time. Last call. All right, so if not, we can move on to CCSL, and that is Layla.
So CCSL is the Concordia Council on Student Life. It meets about once a month to about once a month on usually Friday mornings. There's also a couple of subcommittees within it. It's mainly to approve projects that are funded through a large amount of money that is dispersed through the Dean of Students Office. It's a fun committee. You get to hear about cool things that are going on at Concordia outside of the CSU. You get to sit in on presentations from people who are applying for funding. Veronica and Eamon and I all sit on it, and it's a good time. There's always food, and there's one meeting coming up on the 24th, so there won't be, like, even if we were to leave the seat for someone who would take it after the election, there'd still be a meeting with one less student, and I think there are many committees that have spots for students who will be elected, so I would encourage someone to take this very cool opportunity. You also get to meet a lot of people who work within the university in like unknown departments. It's a fun committee. I would highly recommend.
All right, thank you. Would anyone like to nominate themselves to CCSL? Okay, going once. Yes,
Do you
Timmy?
have the possibility to take decision, like now, at the moment you're able to take decision within this committee?
Yeah, so it's a voting seat, so you go along with everyone else and you have speaking rights, so you can speak to projects or...
Oh, I think she meant quorum.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yes, yes. But it's just another student seat that has the potential to be filled.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who'd like to nominate themselves to CCSL? Okay, so that's not a standing committee, so it won't come back unless requested, but it can always be added back to the agenda if requested. So that we can move on to 6E, which is AVEC Mobilization Committee. And Ahmed, the floor is yours.
So CSU is part of AVEC. AVEC is the voice for, is the Association for the Voice of Education in Quebec. It's the provincial association. And they have 2 seats for 2 councillors. And the mobilization committee, they will be working to support and connect a network local mobilization committee. They plan and promote the mobilization camp, and they will respond to opportunities for mobilization on issues that are important to students. They will meet once per month, and their meeting is online. It's kind of, and they have 2 working groups. The first one is related to the accessible education, and the second one is related to climate justice.
Yes. Yes, Julia?
So you said what was the time commitment?
It's once per month, and meeting is it's online, so it's by web conference or by Google Hangout, whatever.
Okay, thank you. I want to.
You have a question. How many seats did you say for each working group?
It's 2 seats for councillors.
Okay. Rowan?
So
Oh, sorry, did you?
it's one committee that has 2 working groups. And did you get it? Like the mobilization committee has 2 working groups.
2 seats only for councillors or for executives as well? Other executives?
It's for the CSU, so for myself, like again, as I mentioned last time, I didn't want to sit on it. It's because I have lots of work that I'm taking care of. Second, I'd like to give a chance to someone else who might run for next year as an executive. I don't have any intention to run next year. And third, it's a good learning experience if people are familiar with Divest structure. It's similar to Divest. It's a kind of brainstorming where everyone brings their own ideas and they can collect these ideas and work on these projects.
Okay, thank you. Rowan?
Like, appreciate leaving spots open for council, but not having any of our executives, like counselors are for the most part full-time students or part-time students and working. Executives are meant to be doing a full-time job. To me, especially considering that Ahmed is the external and mobilization coordinator, external is half of that job. External means representing two groups like AVEC. So I don't see why he wouldn't be sitting on that. To me, it's literally one of the main parts of his job. And I think leaving, you know, a seat open to council is great, but not having any executives just seems like offloading job onto counselors, which considering we're not paid, considering we're not full-time employees, doesn't make sense to me.
Thank you. So I have speakers list of Awatif, Julia, and Ahmed.
Yeah. I think as part of our discussion in mobilization committee, correct me if I'm wrong, Ahmed, I think we've decided that for each working group there are 3 seats, and the 2 seats that were given to CSU will be one for council and one for an executive.
And just a reminder to speak to the room, please, because
Yes.
if you have conversations like that, it's hard to hear from far away.
Yes, that was my understanding from, that was my understanding from our discussion in the committee. Please clarify.
Can you clarify?
Yes. At the beginning, they told us we have 3 seats. I contacted them and we increased the seats. So we're giving 2 seats for counselors and 2 seats for the students at large. It's similar to the CSU committees. And just to respond to Rowan's, I'm still a member of AVEC. I'm still attending their meeting and I attend the conference. I have a monthly meeting with them where I discuss and give them and tell them the progress of their work. Again, like it's not a working group. I don't mind to sit on this, and again, if no one is interested, I'm happy to take to be part of this. But because I'm already a member of this discussion, and again I'm participating, I'm voting with them. So that's why I made a decision to give a chance to someone else. But if council aren't okay with this, I'm on this committee.
Thank you. Julia?
Yeah, I have a couple of things to say. The first is a question. So if I understood from what Awatif said is correct, it would be one counselor sitting on 3 things. So they would sit on the mobilization committee and then both working groups. Can you first explain that, and then I can ask my other question?
Do you want to go ahead?
So the mobilization is related to the annual campaign, and right now they are working 2 annual campaigns. The first one is accessible education, and they are working on unpaid internships and austerity in small universities. And the second one, it's related to climate justice. So they have 2 working groups, but one mobilization committee.
Okay. I was wondering if, I have to answer.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
If the CSU campaigns, if the CSU campaigns team could maybe have Ermac sit there as like a representative of CSU, is that a possibility, maybe?
Do you want, or Rowan, do you want to respond?
Unless you have a response.
In any Omar?
I'm just not sure if there's a representative body for Ermac to take that on, although if there's no objection to it, like I don't necessarily have something directly, but it is for executives first and then for counselors to be the representative voice and not for employees.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a speakers list of Layla, Ali, and then Awatif. Oh, Ali?
I was just going to say about the Ermac thing, no, because she's staff. And if she's going to be representing on a body like that, I think that means that the CSU has to pay her money for her hours. I think so. And also at the same time, I don't think that a staff member of campaign's office should also take on that job. I feel like that's weird.
Okay, this conversation is getting a little bit off topic. Also, we're not going to appoint anyone without their prior consent as well, so it's kind of a moot point. Awatif?
Well, I resent.
Okay. Is there anyone who'd like to appoint them or nominate themselves to the AVEC Mobilization Committee? Yes, Awatif?
It's not AVEC Mobilization Committee, it's 2 working groups in the Mobilization Committee. So if you nominate yourself, you're technically choosing whether to be on the accessible education working group, or what's the other one?
Climate justice.
Climate justice. So you're not going to the committee, you're going to one working group of the committee. So technically there are 2 working groups. You have to choose from one of them, and each working group has 3 seats.
Okay, I stand corrected. Would anyone like to nominate themselves to the working group? Okay, so if not, we will move on to point F, which is Community Action Fund. And Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Again, Community Action Fund, it's the second committee of AVAC, and they are looking for students from the association that is a member of. They are looking for, they have 3 seats. Currently, Layla's sitting there as the executive, and there is 1 seat available for council. And they meet once per semester or more if needed. And their work is to set a timeline for application and promote the CAF on campus, also to review the applications, and finally to receive reports on project progress. So it's 1 seat for council.
Would anyone like to nominate themselves to the, yes, Peter? Let Peter, or what's it?
How many seats?
1 for council, 1 for executive, and 1 for student at large.
Peter?
Yeah, I was hoping to nominate myself onto the Action Fund.
Okay, do we have a second? Kemi? Would anyone else like to nominate themselves to AVEC's Community Action Fund? Okay. Peter, why would you like to sit on the Community Action Fund?
It's just that I think that I recently have been doing all the money kind of related stuff with all the other committees, so it would be best if I can sit on this to have a general idea, and also like I'm doing other work related to budget and stuff, so it would be good if I can sit on this.
Alright, thank you. I would sit and then Lola.
Can I nominate myself now, or?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to nominate myself.
Okay, do we have a second? Julia? Okay, would anyone else like to nominate themselves to sit on the AVEC Community Action Fund? And just to clarify, there's 1 seat for counselor, correct? Okay. Awatif, why would you like to sit on AVEC Community Action Fund?
The reason why I want to sit on it is because I had an interest to sit on the Community Action Fund for CSU, but because of limited seats, I wasn't able to do that. Also, my interest with this is because of my second major that I'm doing. We do a lot of work with community groups, and we study their structure, how they work, and their funding, and how they can get funding, etc. So I do have a lot of knowledge about community groups, and I think I could contribute with that to the committee.
Great, thank you. So at this point we have 2 applicants for 1 seat, so it's up to council whether they want to, how they want to proceed. Yes, Julia?
Can I have a secret ballot vote?
Yep. Well, I mean, vote on it, but do we have a second? All right, Kemi, is there any discussion to be had? Yes?
Don't we make it always secretive if we have vote?
Sorry?
At the beginning, we made it all, like the votings, it's always secretive, we made it.
Oh, that's true, that's true.
So we don't need
It's been passed on policy.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Sorry, my apologies. Good point. So if there's 2 councillors for 1 seat, then it moves to a secret ballot automatically. Thank you very much. Okay, so Omar is going to shred some paper. We have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. All right, so for those of you unfamiliar with secret ballot, just write down 1 name on a piece of paper. I will collect them, and Corey will watch me as I count them.
Okay, how many did you say?
15. Thank you. Peter, oh sorry, the options are Peter or Awatif. Yes. Or abstain. You can also abstain. What's the question?
If we two have the right vote to, or because I thought we are the event that's supposed to be given by other people. That's why I was.
You can vote. You can vote for yourself, or you can vote for someone else, or you can abstain. So anyone can vote for any of the three. Yes. Yep, Rowan?
Where's the attendance sheet?
It should be going around.
Yeah, I forgot on campus, but I could.
Ah, all right. It will show up. Okay, just a reminder, we're all voting, so if we could keep some kind of decorum, that would be excellent. And I'll come back and pick up the papers.
Actually, yes. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Did you have a poll? Okay. Wow, that's really strong.
I don't think so. Both of you two sound like you have a cold. I just recovered and I'm sitting
The
between
popular opinion is for me to do smoking, so it's not contagious. So, it'll be a good one.
Oh my god, I got sick like 2 weeks ago. And then I was okay, not sick Thank you.
Yes.
Do you have it with you?
I don't
Bring the snacks.
just because I'm leaving tomorrow. I want to keep it.
It's okay, I'm very sorry.
I'm not gonna be here because I'm close to the airport.
Okay.
But like, I'll be at some point at the end. Or we can walk over to the different as well.
Because I'm trying to get home as quickly as possible.
So
I have an exam tomorrow and I still have to do so.
Okay. So you just, I think I'm, no, that's for sure. So I think maybe for first voices, like the first few points, I think you want to step out and grab it.
Yeah, no.
Because I feel like you just volunteer to run and get it.
I did not.
I heard something.
I literally cannot. I still have like my kids.
They're abstained. So they just yeah.
Just like the, just for is it okay to take on checks?
It's not because I don't take the checks on your own.
Yeah. I submitted my nomination.
It's just like
Once it's signed,
And the amounts are
sent out,
recorded.
like someone needs to record what's signed and send it out.
so
Even if I signed it tonight, we can still have to process it tomorrow.
No, it's not.
no, it's for the bookkeeping and everything. It's just if we start taking checks.
I know that's why, like, we can go to the office and get it, but like, we can't bring it. But we'll see what time we finish.
All right, everyone. So I've counted the secret ballots, and Corey was my witness. And Awatif, you've been appointed to the AVEC. Sorry, let me find the name. AVEC Community Action Fund. So congratulations. So with that, we're on. There's no returning business. So we're on new business information. Oh yes, Awatif.
Okay. Can I break Robert's rules now? To add a point to the agenda, and I have a motivation for it, if that's needed. I don't know how it works.
Would you be able to send me the motion first?
It's not a motion, it's a point that needs to be discussed.
Oh, it's just a discussion point?
Yeah.
Okay, then in that case, that's fine. So, yeah, just move to break Robert's rules.
I move to break Robert's rules.
Okay, so we have a second? Okay, so all those in favor of breaking Robert's rules, please raise your placards. 12, all those opposed, 13, all those opposed, 0, and any abstentions. Yes, that was it? Oh, one abstention, sorry. Go ahead.
So do I talk about the point now? Or?
No, just move to technically doesn't need a motion because Robert's rules are broken, just say what it is.
Okay, so there is a document that has been circulated with the documents that we received. It's called Stop the Exploitation of Interns. It's basically a declaration by CUT, which is the group that's campaigning for student labor. It's a declaration that we all need to read before we agree to sign on it. So that's why I want to add it to the agenda, because it has a part that's very sensitive. That's why I'd like council to read it and discuss it and see whether they agree on it or not, and whether they want to sign on it or not. So.
Okay, so I'll add it as 8B since it's just a discussion point. And with that, we can move back into Robert's rules, which we will do now because we don't require a motion. Yes, Kemi?
Point of information.
Yep.
Actually, because I see that like we moved to new business or returning business.
Yeah, there's none. If there's nothing under the point, we just.
But like report from committees and executive report are not going to be discussed.
Yeah, those are under substantive. Okay, those are under the consent agenda, okay. So they just pass through. Okay. And there were a couple of them that were removed and put into substantive. Okay. So.
Kaylin,
yeah. Yes, Omar?
Can we actually just take out the UTSIL point because it's done? Just because we're
oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, so we're going to take out the UTSIL point just for procedure's sake, so it's just not going to show up and I don't have to say it when we get to it. So that's all good. So we're adding, sorry, you CUTE? Okay. What, the name of the point?
Yeah,
Cute, okay. As 8B and taking out 9B. With that, we're done agenda modifications for the evening, so we can move back into Robert's rules right now. So at this point, we're at 8A, which is SUS payment update. And Sue, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so just to bring everybody up to speed, since September 20th, so the last the BOD where the motion was made that me and Omar have to pay back the whatever ASEC gave us as gifts and make an apology within 90 days of the September 20th council. So the deadline for that is on the 19th of December, and there's a council before that, so the payment and the letter will all be done by that council. And the payment, we just got a confirmation after the most recent after the most recent council that the payment is for $841.80. So Omar and I will be each writing a check to the CSU for that amount before the council in December. So we just wanted to give an update on that.
Great, thank you. Rowan and then Roy.
Just a minor clarification, was that 800 and et cetera each or total? Each. Okay, yeah.
Thank you. Roy?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, so you said specifically we have a council the day before the deadline.
It's not the day, I don't think it's the day before.
We have a council meeting on the 22nd.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, we're paying and we're doing the letter before that anyway, so.
What I would ask is that you send the letter to council, like say 2-3 weeks beforehand, so that councilors can provide their input on whether it's appropriate or not. Because if you don't fulfill that obligation by that deadline in our minds, then on the 22nd it's going to be like.
Can I?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yep. When's the second council in November?
The 22nd.
The 22nd. So how about we submit a first draft of that letter by then, and that way we can discuss it as a group, what needs to be changed, what needs to be added on to, and then we'll go from there. Is that all right?
Is everyone amenable to that?
All
right.
Does that work for you as well? Cool.
Okay. Consensus-based decision making. Did you have anything to add?
So if it's consensus, it's noted in the minutes that that's everyone's understanding?
Yes. Yes. I mean, I said it metaphorically.
We don't need to motion it for
yes.
anyone, but just that it's recorded.
All right. Is there any more discussion to be had on this agenda point? Okay, so if not, we can just make sure. If not, we can move on to our TIF's discussion point. I don't see you. Oh, okay. The floor is yours.
Okay. So I just posted the declaration on the Facebook page. I don't know if you guys had a look at it, but am I discussing it? Like,
it's your discussion point, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So my only, not an issue, but the only reason why I put it on the agenda is because technically we need to vote whether we're gonna go with CUTE on striking. So they're asking for a general strike from the CSU. So do we want to strike or not? So I think folks didn't read it. So can we give them like a minute or two to go through it, and then we can see what you guys think about it? Yeah.
Okay. I don't much care for this way of doing business, but if council's amenable to taking a couple of seconds to go through the document, I can see there's some kind of objection. Rowan, you had your placard up?
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is supporting their strike, as in like CSU signing on saying, you know, CUTE deserves better, like CUTE's ideas are good, etc. Not the CSU going on strike.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yes. Well, that is not explained here. They say a collective offensive must be launched. Does that mean a collective offensive as in CSU joining them in the strike or CSU supporting them on the strike?
Ahmed, you were next on the speakers list?
I get in touch with them before sending the English version of this, and the idea that they will have 1 day strike. It's on Friday, November 10th, and it's a strike for interns. It's in the day of in the international day of interns. Yet they didn't call for a general strike or open strike. I get to know this from them. And second, the CSU, as when we signed this, we signed as an endorsement to their call for a protest. It's more a protest than a strike.
Alright, thank you. The speakers list of Rory, Awatif, and then Rowan. Sorry, I saw your
Yeah, my placard was really just that.
One up for that.
Okay, I'll put you on the speakers list as well.
I just put my placard up to say, while people who haven't read it are reading it, we could start discussion. But with that, I guess I'm just then looking for some clarification on what happens if this isn't a full strike and these people don't go to work on that Friday. It's a Friday, right? Mm-hmm. What happens when jobs then fire them? If it's 1 day. If all interns stop working for a longer period, there's leverage. If they stop for 1 day, it's like, okay. So what sort of, I don't know, what sort of repercussions have they anticipated or are going to happen to this?
Ahmed, do you want to respond?
So just to clarify, these interns are unpaid, people who have unpaid internships, and they're using one of the methods, using this day as a special day to raise their voice and convey their message. So it's a way of pressure. About the consequences, I'm not sure about it. I didn't. It's a call that is raised by CUTE, so I'm not sure. I didn't even think about this one. I can get back to you on this.
Okay, thank you. Rowan, Peter, and then Dylan. Oh, sorry. Awatif and then Dylan. Yeah, Rowan.
I have a question for Ahmed. When did the CSU sign off on this?
Do you have a response?
I did it on Friday.
Alright, thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, seeing how council has already backtracked on something that you signed off of, what, I think a month ago now, because you had not, because the external mobilization coordinator had not gotten prior approval from council. Why did the external mobilization coordinator think it was appropriate to again sign off on a political decision on behalf of the CSU without consulting council?
Thank you so much. I'll allow you a response.
First of all, I have a mandate to work on unpaid internship. Second, it's not a call for an open strike. CSU didn't call for any strike. And third, my signature was, as mentioned in my report, I did use the exact same word. I have signed the document and to be only considered with the approval of council.
Just a question for Tiff.
You after?
Oh, yes?
I don't know what.
Just address the room if you're asking a question.
Yeah. Just have a question though, like talking about the strike, how, like, what would happen to it? Like, do we just have like kind of like 1 day of work, 1 day of school, and then have a 10 day? Like, how will this happen if there does a strike to be happen?
Alex, if you want to answer?
Yeah, well, I share your questions too, because I don't know what they're asking for exactly. I don't know.
The question was directed to Alex, if so, you don't know. Dylan?
Yeah, I was curious. Yeah, I thought you were next anyways. So.
It's okay, go on.
Okay. I was curious if any other groups have also signed on to this to endorse or to also go on strike with it.
Yes, Alex?
Oh, it's a question to me.
Oh,
Just a question to
Sally? Oh, okay. Can anyone answer the question? No. Okay. Thank you very much. Rory?
Okay, I'd like some clarification. I don't know if this is parliamentary law inquiry or if it's just a request for information, but I'd like to clarify right now for all of council what is in our bylaws to give signing authority on behalf of the organization to members of the executive.
There's the bylaw, the executive decree. Beyond that, there's nothing
most
specific.
bylaws have specifically under what circumstances an officer of the corporation can bind the corporation. Concordia has it, corporations have it, we should have it, and if we don't, there's some ambiguity as to who can sign off on behalf of the CSU and bind us to something. We've encountered this now twice, where people have thought that it's been within their mandate to make a decision on something. Making a decision on something is very different from obliging the group or obliging the corporation to a cause, to a contract, to anything like that. So I'm just concerned that mistakes have been made in that sense, but that without any bylaw in place, we can't, like, there's no way to blame any executives if they didn't know better, but I'd like to have some sort of awareness about this right now, and if it's something that doesn't exist, we need to identify it and say it needs to be fixed. Because, like, there shouldn't be, if we make decisions on things, then we allow Omar, as the representative of the CSU, to sign off on a contract, say for the daycare, you know, the construction, or a request for proposal, or this UTIL thing. But that doesn't mean that I can sign something for the CSU. I mean, I'm a financial signing authority, but that's totally separate from legal signing authority on behalf of the corporation. So I really think that needs to be clarified before we go further as to the CSU has already been dedicated to something or hasn't, etc.
To respond to your question, there's the bylaw of executive decree, but there's some specific circumstances, including it has to be something, that's the one with exceptional circumstances, so it has to be something that can't be done before the next meeting is called, so there has to be a justification saying why it was done, and it had to be done in this specific delay and couldn't be passed through council at a special or anything else.
And reported to council as soon as possible.
Yes, absolutely. So that's the bylaw you're speaking of, or that's the bylaw that pertains to the question that you asked.
That's a decree, that's not specifically, like, I know in company bylaws, in like letters of incorporation, you need to have, you know, things like, our offices are located here, our headquarters are, you know, meetings are once every year or twice every year, there's 12 people on the board. Those basic things that are in every single corporate charter also have how signing authority is delegated with the organization. Are you saying we don't have that?
It is possible. I'd have to look at the specifics, as I don't want to induce you in error. But I know the bylaws, and the bylaws don't have that. So, just letting you know. If anybody else can answer, please feel free. But that's my knowledge of the bylaws. Yeah, Omar?
So just to add, the executive decree could be used by the general coordinator if it's not possible for it to go to council, and that's the only case. Otherwise, it always has to come to council, and as a company, council is the only approving body that is allowed to authorize someone to sign off on anything. And even this, again, has to be reported at the meeting right after where the decision was taken. And it has to be an emergency and not just something that's convenient. So, for example, like the first option in the bylaws is to go to a special council meeting and so on. Yep. That's separate.
Alright, thank you. Rowan?
Okay, in the...
Point of order, I think Allison still hasn't had her.
Yeah, she's next up after Rowan. It's Rowan, I would say if Julia, Asma, Sally, go.
I'm so sorry, okay, I misunderstood.
Okay. According to the previously cited external executive report, it says, with the approval of council. So my question is, when was council supposed to approve this? Was it just supposed to go through the consent agenda? Because I don't think the CSU should be making political decisions through the consent agenda. I don't think the CSU should be making political decisions on behalf of one executive. So like, when was council supposed to actually approve this? Because there was no motion presented to us here tonight.
Yeah, I did write it in my report, and I did circulate both the French version and the English version. It's my mistake that I didn't include it as a point in the agenda, but it was already there, and I expect that someone gonna ask me or discuss it with me, but yes, it's my mistake. I didn't add it as one point on the agenda.
Great, thank you. Julia? Sorry, I was it.
Okay, going back to the declaration. From my understanding, the structure of CUTE is like a structure of AVEC. It includes student associations and unions. So when CUTE, as an organization, decides to go on a strike, that means the associations and the unions are going to go on a strike as well, unless we're not part of CUTE. As far as I understood from the last council meetings, we did join CUTE because we have the same campaign, no?
You want to respond to that?
CSU isn't part of CUTE, and CUTE is not a provincial association, it's a coalition. CUTE has two mandates. One of them is to fight against unpaid internship, and the second one is to recognize study as work. So they want students to get paid for work. That's why CSU didn't join them. CSU is supporting them because they have the same campaign as us, but we aren't a member of, we are, sorry, I just forget the exact word. We aren't a voting member of CUTE. We just are, no, not endorsing, sorry. Observer? Observer, yeah.
Thank you. Julia?
Yeah, I have a few things to say. So, having been part of the CSU since last year, I know that sometimes the executive can come together and support other people going on strike. So, if this is what happened, then I think it's fine. Like, the executive can say, like, oh, the CSU executive supports blah, 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 like all these causes, whatever. But that doesn't tie the entire CSU to it. So, in that case, I think that would be fine. However, again, there's like a lot of, there's like ambiguous usage of the word support in community groups and sometimes coalition groups, political groups. So I think them having like, or the people who are making decisions when they receive such requests, if you look through their bylaws and you see whether or not they have defined the word support and what they mean by that, what it implies for the CSU, then it would be easier for these decisions to come to council, because if the CSU is going on strike in collaboration with CUTE, then that's a council decision. But if the CSU executive is saying, hey, like, I'm okay with these people going on strike, like, all the power to you, good job, do what you have to do because it is in line with their positions book, then that's fine. I just think, like, there's a bit of misunderstanding, and if I could have the whole support thing clarified, because when I reread this, I'm not sure, like, what we supported. I would appreciate that. And also, is there a motion on the table?
Nope.
Okay.
Right. Asma, I saw your placard before. Okay.
It was exactly what she said.
Okay. Sally?
Yeah, second there, like, we don't really know what they want from the strike. What I understood that we are supporting them, we're not going to the strike with them, but what are the mandates of the strike? What are we supporting? You know? That's my question for Ahmed.
Do you want to respond?
Yes. So we support their call for a protest on November 10th, and we support their call for getting a remuneration for all unpaid internships and ending all form of unpaid internships. That's what we did. And again, for this strike, they didn't yet call for a strike. It's just as a way, when I clarify with them, when I contact them and ask them about strikes, they told me they didn't yet call for any strike. It's yet they will call one, like they will do it one day, but it's not yet.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
can I ask another question?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So, if, like, we want to be part of that strike or protest, we don't have to strike, right? There's still difference, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, go ahead.
If the CSU decide to go on a strike, it has to come to council and or to a general assembly. We didn't call for a strike yet.
Next, I have Omar.
Iverson.
Okay, Rory.
I support the intent of this stance or this position. I don't think anyone in this room is against interns receiving better working conditions and getting paid for it. My concern is about us signing off on this. My concern is also that if the CSU is agreeing to this strike in any way, shape, or form, I would feel comfortable having our general counsel review this document that we're putting our names behind to see if there's any liability exposure that could happen afterwards if something goes wrong. Because if we're consenting to, supporting, agreeing on something, and we're putting our names to it, that incurs a liability. So I, for one, I can't vote on approving this or consenting to it, and I guess this is my sort of conscientious objection right now, because I don't believe that council is making this decision in an informed manner, or in an appropriately informed manner.
Thank you. Kemi?
Yeah, I have kind of many questions. First one is, so this will be for next Friday, and when did the call out went out for this strike?
Do you have a direct? Yeah, go ahead.
The email that I received it on Friday. Sorry, on Thursday, and I signed it. And the deadline that they sent it was November 5th.
Okay. And we don't know when this was first published, kind of like called to all the other union. Well, it's just I'm just wondering if they organized it in a week, or if this has been planned for a bunch of time already.
Do you have an answer?
They planned it for a long time, but they didn't send any invitation. They didn't contact me in any level, except on November. It was in November on Thursday, and they gave me they told me that the deadline to sign and join our protest is November 5th.
Okay, thank you. And I'll give the floor to Awad because she's been waiting. I'll put you back on.
Yeah. So, my personal conclusion with this is that I personally do not agree to sign on this, not because of its topic, it's because my personal explanation of collective offensive must be launched, which means that, and an organization of a general strike, it also says here, is that we're going to be part of it, unless the mobilization and campaigns coordinator checks with them and comes back to us with a new declaration that says whether they want us to join them in the strike or they want us to support their own strike, then we can definitely maybe sign on it or not sign on it depending on what council thinks. But at this moment, I personally feel the wording is very vague. The wording doesn't tell us exactly what we're signing on, and we do not even have information about what we're signing on exactly. So that's my personal opinion.
Okay. At this point, there's no one else on the speakers list and no motion on the floor.
There's
Yep.
no motion yet?
Nope. Yes, Dylan?
All orders of the day.
I will accept them. So at this point, we can move on to substantive. And our first point is 9A, which is First Voices budget line. Sule, the floor is yours for motion.
Okay, so whereas the miscellaneous expenses budget line was created for risk mitigation, but also for projects that come up during the year that are not accounted for, whereas council approved the creation of a budget line relating to the expenses for such a project, First Voices Week, be it resolved that $5,000 be moved from the miscellaneous expenses budget line to the First Voices Week budget line.
Do you have a second? Ali, the floor is yours for motivation.
I mean, we spoke about this last council at the very, very end. Because there's no amount that was budgeted for First Voices Week, and that miscellaneous is literally for that. We're just bringing that down to from 50,000 to 45,000 and putting in the 5,000 that came out into First Voices Week. Since I assume this is going to be a recurring thing, just so that for next year's team as well, that's already something that's in place.
Is there any discussion to be had on the motion? Yes, Ali?
What do you mean it's something that's going to be in place? So next year, they're going to also take it out of the miscellaneous?
For example, if First Voices Week is a thing and that they want to do next year, right? That they already have that budget line and that they have a set amount that they can refer to. Because otherwise, it would just be like a who knows kind of.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. You mean the 5,000?
Yeah, so that for next year's team, they know it was exactly 5,000 that was approved, in case they don't go through the minutes or whatever, but just so that within the budget as well, it reflects that.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
But I also there's a question to that. Do you mean that you'll be able to put the 5,000 as every year, for permanently or what?
No, it's not.
This will be a permanent thing, saying if they do it next year or the year after, is that going to be a permanent money there right away?
Do you have a response?
Yeah, it's not permanent. It's just so that once we close our books, it's literally just so that you can see, hey, this is something that was budgeted for $5,000. This is what we actually spent for it. And then when next year's team is building a budget that's to be approved at their June council, they can either decide to put that in or omit it. It's their call.
Thank you. Julia?
Yeah, this is what I did with menstrual hygiene products line in the sustainability budget, so that it's actually there. And then whenever they do it, they can just see oh, maybe we forgot that this should be included, and then they go search for it.
All right, thank you. Is there any more discussion to be had on Sulei's point? Okay, so if not, we can move to a vote. So all those in favor, please raise your placards. 10. All those opposed? And any abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Can I have my yes noted, please?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
All right, is there any more discussion to be had on the First Voices Week budget line? All right, so if not, we'll move on to 8C, which is CEO payment. And
Okay. So this one's kind of long, and just bear with me because I'll explain the reasoning afterwards. So whereas there is no formal policy for determining the CSU CEO's pay, whereas in previous years the pay has been either an honorarium or a biweekly pay based on hours worked, whereas the 2016-2017 CSU CEO was paid biweekly based on hours worked at a wage of $15 per hour by check, whereas the total amount paid to this 2016-2017 CSU CEO was $8,384.28, including bonuses in their 4%. Be it resolved that the 2017-2018 CSU CEO will be paid by check on a biweekly basis based on hours worked. Be it further resolved that the 2017-2018 CSU CEO be paid an hourly wage of $15 an hour. Be it further resolved that the total amount paid for the 2016-2017 sorry, that's a mistake on my part. It should be 2017-2018 CSU CEO not exceed $9,000, including bonuses and 4%. Be it further resolved that policy committee come up with a formal policy to be implemented in the standing regulations that reflect how the CSU CEO will be paid based on the method used in the 2016-2017 and the 2017-2018 CSU fiscal years. Okay.
All right, do we have a second? Ali, your motivation, Sule?
Okay, so so basically, this year's CEO came up to us and was like, how am I getting paid? And we couldn't find anything in the standing regulations to be able to tell him how he's going to be able to be paid. So we looked back at previous years, and so for example, last year was a bi-weekly basis, which makes the most sense to me. So they input their hours and they are paid every 2 weeks. In years before that, sometimes it was like that. Sometimes it was straight up like a lump sum honorarium at the end of their mandate, which I don't see as very it's not as viable as it should be, and it's not effective. So the $15 per hour, that's based off of last year's per hour wage. I calculated what it would be at $15 an hour and also what it would be at $16 an hour, and that's how I came up with the $9,000 including bonuses and 4%. And that's all based off of last year's calculations. So it's just to be able to formalize this at council so that we can move forward with paying the CEO.
Thank you. So I have a bit of a speakers list of Ali, Omar, Awatif, Michaela, and then Dylan. Ali?
Does this mean that the CEO is getting less money than everyone else on the CSU staff?
Do you have a direct?
So this is why I based it off of last year's wage, and that's why I'm opening the floor to questions. To let's change it to reflect.
Did you have a follow-up?
I think we should have the amount, and also as I see here for the deputy electoral officer too, to be at least the lowest we have at the CSU staff, because I feel like that is what the CSU represents as a salary, as a base salary. Yeah.
Thank you. Omar?
Just very quickly, the reason why the bi-weekly was introduced, I think last year was one of the first years it was done, is because the CEO spends a lot of time like doing their job, and for them to not be able to work elsewhere and not have this bi-weekly income did put some people in a difficult position. So it's like for the work that they're doing, this is their part-time job and they should be paid like regularly, so they're able to like I guess use the money for whatever they need.
Great.
So that was just for like why bi-weekly, sorry.
Thank you. Awatif?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, I heard Sule saying that this is the first time such a thing has been done, but as far as I know, no you didn't?
No.
Okay, so just a note, last year while sitting in policy committee, I think we did work on a system, we did work on a system for payment for CEO, and I don't know if deputy was included as well, but you might want to check that out.
I couldn't find it.
I don't know.
Do you have a direct response to it?
We talked about it, but I don't know if Sophia had actually like written out a policy. But I know the DOs were never mentioned. It was just like the CEO. It was just what we said with Stephanie, that we were going to pay her twice a month.
Thank you. Michaela?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I would recommend maybe talking to Sophia, because I don't think anything came through with our discussion, and we did talk a long time about it. So I think talk to her. She might be helpful.
Thank you. Dylan?
Who logs, does he log his own hours, or does someone log his hours?
He logs his own hours.
Okay.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, then I motion to exclude including the bonus of 4%, because their bonus is dependent on the hours they work, yet there's the risk here that they can log their own hours, self-inflating their bonus amount to whatever they would like, where their bonus could then be based off of the amount of hours they work. If they work more hours, they get more money associated with it.
Okay, I'm not going to accept that. First off, because it was halfway through a speaking turn, and second off, because that's not what the motion says. It says bonus and 4%, and the bonus is determined by council, which is also not codified in the standing regs, but it's determined the same way that executive bonuses are, where council sits around and decides based on, not on hours, but on performance.
So including a bonus and 4%, so then what's the 4%?
When you,
Vacation.
yeah. It's standard whenever you do work that you have 4% paid to you as well.
Okay, I thought it was the bonus.
No, sorry if that wasn't clear.
Right, Rory?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify when we're talking about making sure that the salary is the same as the standard that we've set for other CSU employees. Are we talking per hour, or are we talking total?
Sule, do you want to answer?
Yeah, what position am I on the speakers list? Because I was just going to amend.
Next.
And, okay.
Can anyone answer Rory's question?
Well, it was sort of for Ali, because he was saying, to make it equal with what we're paying other CSU employees, but it's...
Ali?
I think the CSU has like a $16.47 per hour minimum, yeah. I'm not 100% sure about the number, but I think it's good that we have a CEO and a DEO, like all of these people being paid the same. Thing is, last year, the beginning of the year was also around 15, so I guess this is where the 15 comes in. But over time it increases, so I just think that it should be flexible, like something should be written down that will allow it to be flexible to the base price.
Thank you. Sule?
Okay, so I'd like to propose an amendment to my own motion. So where it says be paid a working wage of $15 per hour by check. We'll change the $15 per hour to say to the amount that CSU employees are paid at the minimum per hour.
Okay, do we have a second? Omar, do you want to motivate?
Yeah, motivation, it's vague like that so that every year once the increase happens, that doesn't have to change as well. And that way we can set it to whatever the minimum is at right now, which I don't know off the top of my head.
Great, thank you. Okay, first of all, can the amendment be considered friendly, or is there any opposition to it? All right, so that's good. We can move back to the original list, which is Rowan and then Omar.
Yeah, I mean, I like this motion. I think that it brings a lot of good points and that it brings some necessary reforms. Like there definitely does need to be something done to change this. My one concern is limiting it to $9,000, including bonuses. Like I think it should be at council's discretion to decide a bonus at the end of the year. From hand signals, I get that maybe I'm misinterpreting something. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Do you have a direct response?
Yeah, so the total amount that was paid last year was $8,384. And so I did like some reverse calculations to figure out just what the bonuses were based on like other minutes with 4% and et cetera, just to be able to come up with the 9,000 of, let me just backtrack, words are hard today. The 9,000 was to allocate like an extra just in case, but we can strike that out if it's just like per discretion. It's just so that there's no like hour inflation like Dylan was saying, so that like the CU doesn't, you know, put in like 40 hours a week when they actually just did like 20 hours worth of work. So it's like a control policy, if anything.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a follow-up?
Sure, like I get the point of that for things like hours, etc., but specifically for bonuses, where like Caitlin said, it's based on like performance, and like basing it off last year like has its merits for a VEG, but placing it last year for a limit doesn't make sense to me. Again, looking at last year's like general election, there was 2 full slates and another 3 candidates, and like no contested council seats. Going at the end of this year, let's say there's 4 full executive seats and every council seat is contested, it's going to be a much larger and more complicated election, and the CEO would hopefully and probably warrant a larger bonus. So I think like limiting the amount of bonus doesn't make sense. I agree for like hour inflation for the actual, for like the general pay, but for bonus it doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, thank you. So I have Omar, Sally, and then Ali, and I'll put Sule at the end. Omar?
Just to go back to what Ali had mentioned, and for informational purposes, the lowest that the CSU pays is $14.26. And having a look at the collective agreement, if we were to pay them like according to other people that work at the CSU in a similar job, like the salaries would be different. So I'm not sure if that's what you're basing it on.
Alright, thank you. Sally?
That was a question.
Oh, sorry. Ali?
What CA staff gets $14? This is the first time I ever hear that there's anyone under 16.4.
Right.
Yeah, go
Here
ahead.
I see in front of me Deputy Electoral Officer gets 14.25, but this is the rate from last year. But what about the rates from this year?
Right, so I'm just looking at the collective agreement, which says like each job is identified into a class. Class 1 doesn't have a job, but also the CEO is not, or the DO is not classified as one. So that's one of the things that I said that we should classify. But if we were to, for example, classify level 1 for any employee for whatever reason, although it doesn't exist right now, would be 1426. So
level 1 is 1426, level 2 is 16.
Level 2 is like 1536, level 3 is 1617, level 4 like so on and so forth.
Okay.
And that's why I said like we should compare in the collective agreement because of the way that they're classified as to which job best fits the CEO, for example, if it's a coordinator position, and if it's the DEO, it's an assistant position, then that would be like, for example, class 4 and 5, which then would be paid at like accordingly, which has like 1755 and 1837. Like I'm not suggesting, like I'm just providing the information that like if we were to base it off the collective agreement as to what everyone else is being paid, those are the amounts that it would be per hour.
Thank you. Ali, your speaker's turn is next.
Yeah, I would say, but I wouldn't change it to the lowest. I would make it the same as staff, just because if they were paid 15 just like all staff last year, I think they should go up just as the staff level they were in last year. I don't know how to calculate that, but I mean, you guys can work that out.
Thank you. Sule?
So I'm going to make another amendment. So it's an amendment, but there's really two amendments within it, if that makes sense. Okay, so the first one, so when I said minimum of that a CSU employee is making, we'll make it to the normalized wage of standard CSU staff, which means that like normal staff at the CSU level, which is like the 15 to 16, 25, so it won't be less than 15, right? And that'll be based on the level 2 and 3.
No. Sorry, what's your question?
Okay, so the amendment on the table is to change it to normalized wage of CSU staff.
Yeah, so, and that literally just means it won't be the minimum. And then the second amendment would be the part where it says not exceed $9,000 including bonuses and 4%, we're just put not exceed $9,000 and including 4%, so the bonus won't be included in that motion.
Okay, do we have a second for the amendments? Julia, do you want to motivate?
Based on how the conversation's going.
Okay. Can we agree to the amendments via consent, or is there any dissent to them? Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, like we don't know how much you're gonna pay them. It's from 15 to 25. It's not fixed. That's what you're saying.
So that's the thing. So when you normalize something, you take every single. It's like a weighted average, basically. Yeah.
Okay, is there agreement for the two amendments? So to have normalized wage of standard CSU staff and not exceed 9,000. Yes, Layla?
I just would like to express some concern about tying the pay of the CEO to how other CSU staff is paid, because their pay is determined through a collective agreement that isn't how the CEO is paid. I would advocate us picking a number currently and then referring to policy committee of structure on how to pay the CEO more consistently. But for example, if there was, if QP, like if the union within the CSU went on strike to increase their salary, that would like affect the CEO's pay, even though the CEO isn't part of QP. So I think connecting that doesn't make sense, and I think we should just pick a number, and then as far as long term, that should go to policy.
Okay, so at this point we're discussing the amendments because there's been dissent to having them worded that way. Yes, Sule?
Would everybody be comfortable with $16.50 as like a set number?
Well, for now.
$16.50 for this year, and policy committee, as it says in the motion, will figure out a policy to be implemented for future years.
Yeah. Sally?
How much you were paid last year? 16,
Last year
15, and you normalized it now it's 16.50, right?
I haven't normalized it because I don't have a full list of staff with how much everybody's being paid. $16.50 is just like based on like inflation and just a standard like raise.
Okay, so we're still on the point of the amendments. Rory?
Can we not amend this to go to Finance Committee first to deal with the specifics of what's been funded before?
Sule?
So the reason I brought this to council is because we were trying to figure this out, and this is why this motion was late, is we finally got all the numbers. But if we do not come up with an amount / a way to pay our CEO as soon as possible, it's very likely that the CEO will quit. So we kind of need to do this tonight.
Right, speakers list is open. Rory?
Can I move to amend the motion?
Yes.
I move to amend the last clause. Be it further resolved that Finance Committee come up with a policy to be approved by Policy Committee to be implemented in the standing regulations.
Okay.
Can I motivate for this amendment?
Sorry, I thought you meant to amend the amendment. Because currently there's two amendments on the table, which are still Sule's, because people expressed dissent towards them, which were normalized wage of standard CSU staff and to not exceed 9,000. So right now we're only talking about those, so you can only amend the amendments on the table. So we'll either have to vote them down or vote them in. Yes, Sally?
Didn't he say 16.50 and not normalized? He changed his amendment. The amendment is...
No, he was sounding the room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, what's it?
Can the amendments be said again? I'm so sorry.
So the amendment, yeah. So the first amendment was that the wage be based on a normalized on a normalized rate based off of this standard CSU staff, right? And the second one was the part where it says it doesn't exceed 9,000, including bonuses and 4%. It would just be to take out the bonus part of that, because as Rowan had said before, if the election's like super wacky, then we'd have to like look into like a bonus and it might go over or whatever.
All right, thank you. Julie?
Yeah, I think the CSU CEO needs to get paid. This sounds reasonable, and I'm sure policy committee is going to find a way to implement a great policy for the future. And the fact of the matter is that council basically has overriding authority over the committees of CSU anyway. So if this needs to be done, and research was done, and that's why it was submitted late, and we all agree that 1650 is reasonable, then we should just vote on it now and stop expressing the same concerns over and over, I think. Rory?
When we say normalizing, can we be specific as to what normalizing method we're using?
Yeah. Sule?
I'd like to amend my amendment.
Okay.
Okay, we'll take out the normalizing, we'll put 1650, right? And then we'll, as finance committee, we'll come up with an actual like method.
Well, not yet, we won't, because now it's policy committee.
Well, yeah, well.
Okay, so so the amendment on the table is to make it $16, sorry, $16.50 or?
$16.50.
$16.50 an hour instead of the normalizing thing, and then to keep the not exceed 9,000. Do we have a second? Rowan, your motivation, Sule?
Feeling the room.
Okay.
Point of personal privilege?
Yes?
Is the motion posted on the Facebook group, or, I mean, like the amendment?
It was sent out.
Was sent out where?
I'll post it on the Facebook group just in case it didn't, it should have been in the last round of documents.
It was.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay. So it,
No, I mean the amendments, or the dates, because I can't keep up with the wording.
the amendment is just $16.50 as an amount, $16.50 an hour instead of 15, and then not exceed $9,000 instead of the 9,000 and 9,000. Sorry.
Yeah, so 9,000 including the 4%.
Yeah. So it's really small amendments. Okay. So I'll open a speakers list. Rowan.
Just clarification. This still takes this current manifestation of your amendment still takes the bonus part out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bonus part is that.
Okay.
Okay. So can we all agree to the $16.50 as an amendment? Yes, Dylan?
Why $16.50? Like, what's the rationale? Like, you said inflation. Like, I'm just curious.
Fair wage. It's fair wage. They deserve it.
With the amount of work they put into the elections, it makes sense that it would be 1650. If you have a counter offer.
Okay, so the amendment on the table is $16.50, but I see there's still discussion.
Is there someone else on the speakers list?
No.
Oh.
Rory? Oh, sorry.
Can I
Rory.
call the question, please?
Yes, there's no one on the speakers list, so we'll move to a vote. Okay, so if there's no more discussion to be had, all those in favor of the amendment, which is to have it $16.50 and the not exceed $9,000. 11, all those opposed? And any abstentions? 1, 2, 3. Perfect, so that carries. Yes, Sule?
I'd like to make another amendment to the rest of the motion.
Okay.
So it's 2 amendments within one. The first one is what Rory had said before, so be it further resolved that Finance Committee come up with a system to be reviewed by Policy Committee for implementation. And the second one would be to basically have this same method of payment for the DEO, because this was not included in that.
Second.
Seconded by Julia. Do you want to motivate?
The DEO not being paid in this was, that was straight up an oversight on my part. I just, CEO, I forgot to include a DEO, and then the Finance Committee just to figure out a system for, I guess, a model to be able to, you know, have it work every year, and then Policy Committee would be implementing it in a formal, in a formal policy.
All right. Rory?
Okay, I'm a little bit concerned with like copy pasting this with DRO. Does that mean that we're approving everything in terms of, like you say, whereas the total?
Just to be result.
Okay.
Okay, so the budget, the total budget for it that we're approving or the hourly wage, none of that is...
So,
Do you want to explain?
yeah, so the whereas wouldn't be for the DEO, but just like to say we're paying the DEO $16.50 an hour as well, to a maximum of $9,000, including 4%, not including bonus, and that finance committee will come up with a model for it.
So we're now changing this motion from approving $9,000 to approving $18,000, correct?
Well,
Okay, do you want to?
yeah. So CEO and DEO pay are both already already budgeted for, to like amounts similar to this anyway. It's just to have it formalized for this year so that we can start paying them.
Alright. Is there any more discussion to be had regarding the two amendments that Souley just read out? Okay, so if not, we can move to a vote. So all those in favor of the two amendments, please raise your placards. 13, all those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. So that carries, and we're back on the motion as amended. Is there any discussion to be had on the main motion? Okay, so if not, we can move to a vote. So all those in favor of the motion as amended, please raise your placards. 12, all those opposed? 0, and any abstentions? 1, 2, 3. All right, so the motion carries, and I will inform the CEO as according to the standing regs, I'm the vehicle for between council and the CEO for discussion. So with that being said, we can move on to conflict of interest, and Rory, the floor is yours for a motion.
Okay, well, I wanted to bring this up as a discussion point first, because it's something that we've brought up at council before, and I wanted to see what councillors felt in this regard, because we don't necessarily have some strict rules established in our bylaws about it yet. But it came to my attention that two of the executives, both Souley and Omar, sit on the board of directors of CASA. Omar is the chairperson for CASA, and the reason why this caused concern was because as paid executives of the CSU, they have different duties and responsibilities with regards to things like loyalty to the corporation than directors do. As councillors on the CSU, we wear multiple hats, and that's typically allowed. It's different when you're a director who is there to provide direction on the corporation than when you're paid to be in a specific role in a specific job. So I'm concerned that these two executives are sitting on the board of CASA, which has potentially conflicting or aligned interests with the CSU, and that this affects their capacity to make independent decisions as executives.
All right, thank you. Omar?
I'd just like to mention, I recognize what you're saying. As far as the chair is concerned, I'm not going to comment on director. I guess I'll leave that up to Souley. But as chair on CASA, I don't have any voting power. I have no operating role. I've actually never expressed my opinion on CASA. I've never been a part of any decision that CASA has ever taken. So that being said, I'm literally there to administer the meetings, make sure that they're in accordance with their constitution, which is equivalent to the bylaws, and book of policies. So I recognize what you're saying, but I'm not sure how my position as chair would conflict, because I do not take any decisions on CASA or at the CSU that directly affect CASA.
Great, thank you. Souley?
Yeah, so I'm an independent director on CASA's board. What that means is I represent basically what councillors on the CSU level do, right? So, for example, an arts and science councillor will represent the interests of the arts and science students that they represent. As an independent director, I'm supposed to represent the interests of business students to CASA, right? But it's two completely different or independent entities. So CASA and the CSU are not affiliated in any way. So I didn't see a conflict of interest there, just because it's like when I'm doing CSU stuff, it has nothing to do with CASA stuff. When I'm doing CASA stuff, it has nothing to do with CSU stuff.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Rowan, I didn't see you.
I just want to respond to, general statement. Kind of going off of what Roy has said and responding to some of Omar's comment where like chair of CASA, Omar would not make any sort of political decisions. I think chair is specifically a political position, like something where you're supposed to be completely removed, and I see Rory's concern where that can be hard to balance, whereas an executive it's like explicitly political in a lot of decisions, aka anything council or referendums tell you to. So I do kind of see, like I agree with Rory that there's very much potential for a conflict in that. Yeah, that's good for now.
Alright, thank you. So Dylan, Rory, and then Omar. Oh, sorry, Julia, Dylan, sorry.
Julia before Dylan or
Yes,
Dylan?
no, it was you first.
Okay. I just had a question. I was wondering if either, well, I don't think Omar, but just for clarity's sake, does anyone sit on like a financial committee of any sort, and like what are your responsibilities with that?
Do you have a direct? Yeah, I'll allow it since it's make this go faster.
Sure. I mean, I was appointed to their finance committee to oversee their club's budgets, but I resigned.
Alright, thank you. Omar?
I don't participate in any committee. So my only interaction with CASA, other than the fact that there are many friends that are involved, is absolutely nothing.
Okay, thank you.
Dylan?
Just to comment on what was said earlier about the CEO position, the chair position. What you were referring to would be that Omar would have a conflict within the board itself, so he wouldn't be fulfilling his position as the chair. It's not our responsibility as the board for the CSU to comment on whether he's fulfilling his obligations on another board. That's their decision. If they believe that there would be a conflict of interest and he could not remain neutral, that's their decision and not ours.
Thank you. Rory?
To clarify what Dylan just said, that that was not my point at all. We're not making any comment on whether CASA thinks there's a conflict of interest. My concern is that both of them receive remuneration from CASA. They both get paid, they both get honorariums from CASA. As a chairperson, like, to be very frank with everyone in the room, we know how student politics work, and the chairperson has a lot of sort of informal power in creating an agenda, allowing things on the agenda, making exceptions, putting things in last minute, allowing discussion, controlling discussion, and it's that sort of potential for conflict that exists. The fact that they choose the speakers list, maybe to provide some context to everyone else in the room, I've been on CASA before, and it works a little bit differently from the CSU. So the expectations and the sort of procedures that we are used to using here don't necessarily exist there. I'm also concerned with the amount of time that this takes for both of these two executives. If it's I mean, I'm no one to say that volunteering for things is not great if you have the extra time. But I'm concerned specifically for someone like Sule, who has a very active day-to-day role. If you're spending your time on CASA stuff, I mean, being a director takes some amount of time. You have to read all the documents, you have to be involved in the decisions, you have to be talking to the subs, you have to be doing all these other things. There's duties that are in CASA's constitution and bylaws that you have to follow, that you have to abide by. You have to report every month, right? So where on the CSU, every executive sends a report every month, on CASA, Sule as a director has to do that. So there's differences like that where they do have active jobs to perform and they receive payment for it. I'm just concerned about whether it has the potential to impact their performance at the CSU.
Okay, thank you. Omar, Rowan, and then Dylan.
So just a few things. I just want to go back to what was previously said by Councillor, that we could control the speakers list, the agenda, and so on. CASA has their own policy that if it's not submitted to me before Friday, the Friday before the meeting, which are usually on Tuesdays, I do not add it. I've consistently followed that. That being said, again, like the chair here at the CSU, the board of directors or the councils can override it whenever they want. The same thing with the speakers list. I think it has been consistent. There's very little that the chair could actually do because obviously people don't remain quiet if they're consistently being passed on. That being said, the time, just as chair in my capacity, I would say maybe at most 3 hours a month. So usually I send a reminder for the reports and dates that are due the Friday before the meeting. After that, the documents and everything are sent to the secretary, who uploads them to the drive. I don't have to meet with anyone to clarify. I have nothing else that needs to be done. That being said, I have prioritized previously things at the CSU for which I have not attended CASA, and they're okay with it, they're aware of it. And the last thing is that, so sorry again, just the time, it's less than 3 hours for the month. The last thing was like conflicting in positions and so on. CASA is apolitical as an association most of the time, I can't guarantee 100%. Whereas the CSU is obviously not, we do take strong political stances. And I think in my job, obviously, for example, Bill 62, I've presented it well. I have taken the tone that the CSU has desired for the bill, whereas at CASA, I haven't spoken about it. I haven't tried to bring anything that the CSU has done to CASA, or anything that CASA has done to the CSU.
Okay, thank you. So I have Rowan, Dylan, Sule, Kemi, and then Awatif. Rowan?
Yeah, I have 2 points. One, kind of build off of something that Roy already said in terms of time commitment. I did, honestly, as a signing authority, kind of see that on behalf of the finance coordinator during orientation, especially when he was, correct me if I'm wrong, but a Frosh leader, I believe. And as signing authority, I noticed that like checks going through orientation took like multiple weeks to come through, instead of like generally during orientation, the exec is like all hands on deck, and it's, in my opinion, probably the most intensive time for signing checks or for filling checks, and seeing like the checks not even starting to come in until, for the most part, after orientation was actually done. It was like strange to me, and I think time commitment can be a large part of that. The second and separate point I wanted to bring up is where we are discussing, and like council hasn't taken any stance on this at this point, but discussing whether or not this is a conflict of interest. I would like to also point out that it was the finance coordinator that put forth the idea for the collaboration fund into the CSU orientation budget, and this was something that has never been done before to my knowledge. So this was essentially a fund that gives out money to the different faculty associations, and included in that is CASA. So essentially, within this budget line, it was, and it was of course approved by council, but it was an idea that came from the finance coordinator that led to CASA getting financial benefit from the CSU. And I think that that's something that needs to be put on the table and considered by council.
Thank you. Dylan?
Come on, let's be serious here for a second here. Are we really going to argue time commitments and like, are they doing all their jobs? Are they doing it to the fullest of their potential? Like, we're just micromanaging at this time and nitpicking on how much time could they be doing. Like, it's as if we're like coming here and being like, well, I know Sule spends 6 minutes in the bathroom sometimes. He should really be at 3 minutes. Like, if his performance has not deteriorated to what you're saying, you're trying to like link things together that aren't like causality. Like, just because things actually like go in a straight line doesn't mean that A actually leads to B. You actually have to like put things together. And then the other thing that I'm actually interested in is, are any of the other executives involved in any political group, nonprofit, or other organization in some overseeing fashion? Because maybe we should then also look at their conflicts of interest that might be potential. Do we have any answer?
I'm not going to entertain that question, because it's going to go way off topic, and they don't have to answer that. Sule?
Okay, so a couple of things. One, in terms of time commitment for my position on CASA's board. It's literally 2 to 3 hours a week. Most of it's just on Facebook chat. We're a team of 5 independent directors, so the workload for all of that is split pretty evenly, and they know that my commitment is firstly to the CSU, but that I do help out in terms of giving them aid with when they need help to write up stuff and so forth. So for the time commitment part, most of the time it's done after work hours or on the weekend, stuff like that, and it doesn't take up much of my time per week. In response to Rowan's point of the orientation thing, I was a Frosh leader for CASA's Frosh, but the time that CASA had their Frosh is completely different than the time that orientation was happening. So CASA's Frosh happened the week before orientation. It was 3 days long, and I did step out of CASA's Frosh to attend some CSU meetings and stuff like that. In terms of the check recs, I was having some trouble over the summer, but that's not related to CASA. That's just like personal stuff happening outside of that. I have regulated it to a point where I think that I've improved in terms of my timing, and I hope that the other execs can, I know, talk to that. In terms of, I think that's about it, unless like I didn't hit all the points there.
Thank you. Kemi?
Yeah. So like I have kind of a question. Well, first a comment and then a question. Like my first comment is concerning like what had been said from one of the councillors. I think it's quite important concerning that the responsibility of the executive are paid, and also kind of they're taking a large part into the CSU to know what kind of commitment they can give to this role in terms of time. Also, it's a question for the financial coordinator. So I'm not sure to understand how like you're getting paid from CASA to do a job, or
do you have a director?
Yeah, so as an independent director on CASA's board, at the end of the year I receive an honorarium of up to, I think it was $500, something like that.
You've added to it since.
Sorry?
I think you've added to it.
No, we haven't. But anyway, it's up to $500, maybe $1,000. I'm not sure on the exact number, but it's not a guaranteed honorarium. Sorry?
500.
Okay, so $500, and it can be less than that depending on performance.
Thank you. Yeah, do you have a follow-up?
yeah, performance in what sense?
In terms of like, we set out objectives at the beginning of the year, and then whether or not like the objectives are met, and then like the whole board decides whether or not the person gets their honorarium.
Right?
No? Am I wrong?
Okay.
Yeah, you're wrong.
Decorum. Okay, we'll let this settle itself out as we go. We're getting a little bit off topic and circular. Awatif? Julia?
Yeah, so my concern would be if anyone had authority in terms of financial matters, and also, I might be mistaken, but I think Layla is the one who administers the faculty collaboration budget line, is that correct? Yeah, so I think like if there are any conflict of interest, then it would be, in my mind, like transmission of information at council. So like if someone at the board meeting, if someone at the board meeting mentions the CSU, like I would assume that Omar would like ask to recluse himself, but I don't know if that's the case, but like that's where I would be concerned mostly. But I think like I don't think it's necessary for us to try to delve into the specifics of what another corporation is doing unless it's specifically like completely not okay. And if you know, Sule's there and being like, hey, I'll write you a check for like, I don't know how much money from the CSU if you do this, this, and this, then that obviously puts him at fault. But I haven't seen anything of the sort happen so far, so I wouldn't really be concerned with that. I'd be more concerned with like whether or not the chairperson recluses themselves if a conflict of interest arises or like a conversation on a touchy subject arises during the board meetings.
Thank you. Rory?
I guess I want to try and bring this back to, I'm not accusing either of the two executives of having a conflict or being in a situation where they were in conflict so far. The problem that I see is that I wouldn't know. I'm not sitting on CASA in that room during their meetings to police whether there's a situation that these two would be placed in conflict for. I'm concerned, I guess, by nature of behavior shown in the past, that judgment in this matter may not be what is expected by council. I'll give a good example of things that can happen. Last year, CASA had the international tuition hikes was brought to CASA, was brought to CASA's council. If that's something that the CSU takes a position on, and CASA is then asked to take a position on it, or CASA is asked to do something about it, etc. Those are situations where they would, want to recuse themselves, depending on whatever the positions were on either side. But there are situations where CASA, a non-political group, can do things that interact with the CSU or that affect the CSU. So this isn't necessarily to say that they've, broken their conflicts. It's just that the potential exists. I'm not there to see whether Omar has recused himself or would recuse himself. To go off what Dylan has said, we're really not trying to nitpick. I mean, pay $500 on CASA. We're not talking about on CASA. I don't care what CASA does. I'm not at the CASA board meeting saying that these two have a conflict. I'm at CSU saying we pay them a salary. I don't know how much that salary is, but I think it's a little bit more than $500. So it's not nitpicking per se to be concerned about them spending their time or having a conflict for another organization. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rowan?
I'll rescind.
Dylan?
I'm just gonna say that like what your executive, just like any employee does on their after hours, is on their personal time, is of their to score. If they decide to, you know, go for weekly jogs, or if they decide to sit in on meetings, then that is their decision to do with their personal time.
Thank you. Sule?
Yeah, so I forgot to touch on the collaboration budget that was brought up before. So actually, when I was running for the CSU position, one of the things that I wanted to do was kind of bridge the gap between the different faculties. And this was maybe not completely understanding the role of the CSU versus the role of the faculty associations. But I don't like that there is a divide between, you know, business students and arts and science students and stuff like that. Like a business student calling themselves a JMSB student versus a Concordia student. You know, there's like that small thing that like we're all Concordia students, right? And so the collaboration budget was something that I suggested that we make, and that I suggested to council that we make in that very spirit to be able to, you know, collab with other groups that we're not affiliated with. So like make a collaboration with, I don't know, ASFA or FASA, ECA, and CASA, right? And not like necessarily just for CASA. Again, it's not at my discretion, but this is something that's overseen by the student life coordinator. So it's up to them to see how they spend that budget. The second point I wanted to make that Rory had brought up about us being paid a salary and that CASA pays us an honorarium. So we're salaried as a full-time job. So a full-time job is 35 to 45 hours a week on average, right? So an average of 40 hours a week. There's a lot more hours in a week than 40 hours a week. 3 hours a week extra that I take to go to meetings and to work on some small projects. I don't see it as a big issue, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. Rory? Sorry, Omar and then Rory. Sorry, my apologies.
So you've made it clear you're not accusing, I recognize that. Thank you for making it clear. So I do, it's not that I recuse myself because I'm never involved in the conversation per se. Neither do I direct the conversation in a way. Like if there's a conversation having about the CSU, to me, it literally makes no difference what's being said because it's the speaker's list and people are voicing their opinion. The other thing is that last year, for example, there is a counselor here I don't want to point out, but that was involved in the international student hike. I was still chair at the time. That was something that was brought to me. I sat down, like I was also a counselor. I voted for the international student hike. When it came to CASA, I told them what the process was. There was a petition for a General Assembly. They had a General Assembly at which everyone got the equal opportunity to present, to voice their opinion, to take the decision. I did not favor anyone from the CSU or representing the CSU to, you know, have a more say than anyone else. That was at CASA, so I think that would be a demonstration of my ability to remain objective and apolitical, not involve myself in the discussion at hand.
Thank you. Rory?
If I want to make a motion, do I make it and then speak?
Yes, please.
Okay. I move that the CSU mandate any executives, I'm trying to word this so that it's for future.
Just make sure it's written and sent to the minute keeper as well.
Okay. Rather than pointing out specific positions or specific people. I move that the CSU mandates any executive who sits as a director on another corporation's board to include in their monthly report any decisions related to finances, any decisions that relate to the CSU, and any potential activities or initiatives that may infringe upon the CSU.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Yeah, second.
Oh, Omar, your motivation, Rory?
Basically what I'm trying to do here is my point was not to punish these people, they haven't done anything wrong, but to bring up that there's a potential for conflict here. I'm concerned about it, and I'd like to set in place some prevention measures for future. So this basically, what I want to do is require the executives I'm concerned about to submit within their monthly reports if CASA discusses something like the international tuition hikes, if they discuss something like unpaid internships, if they discuss things like, let's do a collaboration event with the CSU and here's how the funding's going to work, we're going to receive this money or we're going to pay this money or whatever it is. if they do anything that is, you know, in overlap, that they report it within their monthly reports, so that we're aware of it.
Right, thank you. The speakers list, Khadija? Okay, in my opinion, the meeting's not going to go longer than 90 minutes. If it does, I'll put the motion on the table. Okay. Camille?
Yeah, I'm afraid that some of the financial, actually most of the financial decision done by CASA will be confidential. No, they're not? Okay, then fine.
Thank you. Sule?
Yeah, so I like the way that this motion was presented. I do have a question for stuff that's being submitted. So does that also include stuff that CASA will be doing or try to implement for their systems that could be applicable to the CSU, but that the CSU is not doing?
No, this is conflict related. It's if you're making a
not
decision.
something procedural.
Yeah, I don't need an update on what CASA's doing.
That's not what it is.
You know, like a newsletter in the reports. It's just if you, in your position on CASA, were involved in a decision, or if a decision came up on the board that you were there at the meeting for, that you put it in. Last month we discussed this. I refrained from conversation. I refrained from commenting. Or I recused myself and didn't sign the check, or whatever. That you report that in there so we know what you've done.
Great, thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Follow-up and also another question, but to the board. So the follow-up question was, I forgot it. All right, and the question to the board was, I was sitting on CASA's finance committee to oversee the association and the committee's budgets, but I have resigned from that once I saw that there was a conflict of interest motion, just like to try to be proactive about it in terms of like I don't want to for someone to think that I'm doing something sketchy, right? The finance committee on CASA's end does not do anything related to the finances related to the CSU. Is the board okay with me sitting on the finance committee on CASA, or should I keep my resignation?
The motion's about reporting.
I'm just trying to see like the.
We can deal with
once
that
once
after.
the motion goes through, this is a separate.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's separate, and I think it's going to throw us off topic,
Okay.
so we can talk about it after.
Information
Yep.
on this?
No, not on this.
Okay.
We'll deal with this
Fine.
after. It's just on the motion to report. Dylan?
Yeah, curious now then, which executives are on what board, or within a director position of any other organization?
I'm not going to make people answer that question
Motion
because
includes them.
It's the motion at hand, and if we aren't aware of what boards people sit on, how are we supposed to actually look for it in their report or do follow-ups if we wish to on our own behalf?
do you want to clarify?
Yeah, if I can clarify, the whole point of this is that, like, I don't want to go around policing any executives. That's not my job, and it's not a nice, like, environment or relationship to have. So this isn't so that we can go in and check and be like, oh, you're on a corporation's board and you didn't submit it in your report. It's, if you're on a board, you know, you put it in your report. If you don't, and we find out later, and it's like, I was hiding that, like, you're going to be screwed. Okay, that's the whole point, is this is set up as a prevention measure and a protection for later if something happens.
Do you want to follow?
Yeah, to base on that, if we don't know which boards all the executives do sit on, then we cannot do that follow-up if we wish to on our own behalf, to see in fact if they are adhering to the aforementioned motion.
I would entertain the question in a Concordia context because CSU's members are Concordia students, but I don't feel comfortable asking people whether they're part of the Young Liberals or the NDP or anything like that. I don't feel like that's appropriate.
But then how is it appropriate that they disclose any activities associated with their own groups then? We
They
cannot.
infringe on the CSU. There has to be a connection there.
And
I don't want to know that CASA did frosh and had fun. I want to know if the CSU paid for it.
Calls for the order of the day.
Call for order more than one.
Yeah, whatever. It's just-
Okay, yeah, it's diverting a little bit. Did you want to follow up?
Yeah, like one of the reasons behind my suggestion is that if you think about the controls put in place, we're trusting the people who we think might have a conflict of interest to report their conflict of interest, but if in fact they have a conflict of interest, they would not report on the matter at hand. They would simply just do their normal actions act according to their own interests and then never report to the CSU.
Thank you. Omar?
I rescind, sorry.
Okay. Kemi?
Yeah. Well, yes. I feel a bit weird too, having the people kind of like saying in what they are. Like this have been brought up by a counselor, and I feel like I can trust the people in this room as executive to make the right decision in what they have been hired for. And I feel like kind of forcing people it's very oppressive, I feel. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Awatsu? Okay, Eamon?
So just to sort of, I guess, demystify what, like the verbiage of what Rory proposed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, in a nutshell, it's just execs have to disclose any dealings with intra-Concordia groups they sit on boards with that are germane to the interests of the CSU.
Do you have a direct?
Okay, my direct response is this. I didn't include within Concordia for a reason. Why? Again, let's remember that there's a difference between an officer or an executive of the corporation and a director. And that if they're on the board, if they're a director of something externally, it's totally fine. We don't care. We don't need to know. They don't need to report it. But if they're on the example, you know, Young Liberals of Quebec, and Young Liberals of Quebec says to the CSU, oh, hey, we want to fund a conference on this or that, that's a connection. That's a conflict. Conflict is not a bad thing. Like, there's a negative connotation to the word. But my clarification is that even on external groups, like maybe they sit on the board of the university, maybe they sit on a funding board, whatever, there can be connections with the CSU. And if there are connections, and if there are decisions within those connections that affect us, you report it. It's proactive disclosure. I'm just trying to require people to proactively disclose it in their monthly reports. That's it.
Great, thank you. Yep.
So just still sort of trying to, if I'm understanding it right, it is just like, I think there's been a lot of talk of the room, like sort of reading it as the motion as some sort of reprimand, which it's not, right? It's just solely so that in the future, should this arise, we have a way to apply, we have a way to deal with it that's codified in our bylaws, basically.
Question.
Sure, yes.
So this is mostly just to give council the opportunity to see what types of situations or conflicts have come up. If we read all the executives' reports, we see what they've been doing, we see that they've been on CASA and they made a decision on this or that had some conflict, we can ask them about it. The reason why this is like a preventative thing is because of like conflicts in the past where decisions were made that weren't in the best interest of the corporation, and it's like, you should have told us, we should have known. So this just forces us to know in future when that conflict is there for us to know, and then we can ask them about it.
Thank you. Dylan?
Yeah. It just comes back to the whole point that you're only going to know if they do exclude themselves from conflict. You'll never know if they are withholding information, because if someone was in a conflict of interest and acting according to their own accord, well then they're just not going to include it in the report. Without having an understanding of what organizations people are part of, there's no follow-up that can be done.
Thank you. Asma?
Yeah, so I'm listening to the concerns and like to the length and depth of the conversation, and it is interesting and important. I'm getting a sense that some of these conversations might be useful in referring to policy committee, where members could come in and perhaps bring more to discuss. It is repetitive. There's many more things being added, which are very useful, but I just don't know whether we can resolve it tonight. And we could definitely present something as a a motion or a policy or something that could be adopted or amended as necessary when we have more something more concrete, looking at ethics and different aspects of it.
Thank you. Sally?
Well, I was just going to say that, like, I think the motion is really vague. Like, okay, let's see their finances, and then you say, no, their finances, we don't care about their finances. Maybe if there's a conflict, like, okay, I can see where's this motion going, but it's it's not well structured. So I think we should move to give it to finance and like work on it and have a motion if we want to have a motion. Because the motion on hand is not very good.
Thank you. Omar?
I would like to make an amendment to the motion, be it further resolved that the policy committee create a section for the standing regulations relating to disclosure of conflict related to other boards.
It's an amendment of a different nature. Does that?
It doesn't.
It doesn't?
It's not an amendment.
Change the essence of your motion.
It doesn't, that's true, it doesn't.
A bit of a separate motion. Sorry. Chair's discretion. Whatever.
Can I motivate for my amendment?
Yeah, I'm just contemplating the nature of the first motion. The first motion was to, no, because the first motion pertains to disclosure of conflict in the report, so this still pertains to disclosure of conflict, so I'll have to see the, it's related. Do we have a second? Julia, your motivation for amendment?
So it's just that, like, it's very good that it's been put in there, obviously support it. It's just that to avoid, for whatever reason, if someone's not able to refer to it, I think if it's in the standing regulations, a lot more concrete and clear as to what the obligations of the executives are in order to disclose and what needs to be included.
Okay. Is there any dissent to the amendment? Okay, so if there's no dissent, it can be adopted by unanimity? Okay, just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So we can move back to the original speakers list, which goes Ali, Eamon, Rowan.
I just wanted to say that this motion is very similar to a motion that was adopted last year in regards to receiving gifts. Like, for example, if an executive had gone out with someone and they discussed something that relates to CSU, and that person, for example, paid for dinner or any of that stuff, they had to write a report and say what they discussed and all that stuff. So this is kind of very similar, so it's like pretty much the same.
Okay, thank you. Rowan, Omar, and then Sule. Omar?
It's very, I would say it's very different, like especially although that's something that policy committee should still look into and bring back, which still hasn't been done. But that one is to disclose if there has been any sort of gift, sponsorship, payment that's done, whereas this is different, this could be part of a decision-making process. So I think like policy committee should consider both of them because it's been quite some time that the previous motion has not been discussed about. And so that's all I have to say.
Great, thank you. Eamon and then Rory, sorry.
So kind of leapfrogging off of what Ali just said, there is, I think there's been some sentiments expressed that, you know, how are we going to know if, you know, if the executives are being truthful about their obligations or whatever. And I think the important thing is, well, a part of that is we do have to, it's like declaring gifts. Yeah, we do have to trust that they will do that. And that if they do not do that, somebody will find out about it and they will be held accountable. But there is a degree of, trust and a degree of like an honor system that this is based on. And I think that is, that's sort of fundamental to the well-being of the CSU as an organization, that we do operate in good faith, right? And that there are means by which we can deal with breaks from that and breaches of that good faith, but that we do function based on that. So I think that the idea of having like, you know, a registry of like what boards people are on and whatever, it doesn't really hold a lot of water. It should just be the entire thing, the entire project of the CSU is based on the good faith representation of the people who elected us here.
Thank you. Rory?
Two quick points. One, I wasn't opposed to creating any policy or putting something in place, you know, sort of more substantially to change our bylaws, specifically because this isn't something new. This is something in the Companies Act that is already required of any director or officer of a legal entity. So we're already bound to report conflicts of interest, period. So, you know, my motion is sort of just notifying everyone that they have that obligation. So creating policy is great, but even if we don't create this policy, executives and directors are still obliged to report. That's in the law. We can't change that. I brought this forward as mandating them to have to disclose it, specifically because, yes, we're acting in good faith, but we've seen, just like the motion passed last year about receiving gifts, that it wasn't followed. So trying to be proactive and having people disclose these things is just like last year when they put that policy in place. If you receive a gift, let us know. If you were involved in a decision that was conflicting, let us know. So with that being said, it's fine to send it to policy committee. No problem with any delay there. But just so everyone knows, we're still bound by that legal obligation. Like until this policy is passed. It doesn't change anything.
Okay, thank you. Rowan?
Is there a speakers list?
Yourself and Sule.
Sorry? Mine's just a quick thing. I rescind.
Sule?
Do you want to go back on speakers list after? I do think it's important to have it in the policies as well, just because our roles are a high turnover, right? And like if someone isn't super familiar with their legal obligations as an officer of a corporation or as a director of a corporation, at least they have that in the standing regulations or the bylaws which they can refer to and which they're obligated to know. So it's more of a tackling it on all fronts kind of thing, the way that I see it, so that like, the issue that happened with Omar and I with regards to the SUDS thing doesn't happen to anybody else.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion to be had on the motion?
Can the motion be
Yep. Do you want to reread your motion?
with the amendment?
I got the amendment at the end.
I move that any executive of the CSU be mandated to report in their monthly reports any decisions or involvements with external corporations on which they sit as a director to the CSU.
Thank you. And the motion to amend was just that policy committee create a section for the standing regulations relating to disclosure of conflicts of interest. Right. So with that, all those in favor, please raise your placards. 12. All those opposed? 0. And any abstentions? 1, 2. All right. So that carries.
For me.
Yes.
The whole gifts motion, was that ever implemented into the standing regulations, or?
Can we get a direct response? Rory?
As per the bylaws, it doesn't necessarily need to be in order for it to be binding upon future executives or future councils.
Okay.
Was your question just in general, like to know if it was in the standard?
Yeah, because I feel like it would be like, if we're making a policy for disclosure of conflict, it'd be important to have that whole gift part be part of that policy.
Yeah, there's something in the, I can find you.
It's already amended?
September we sent it.
Yeah, I can find you the exact wording if you want.
Cool. No,
but okay.
We definitely did that.
Okay. Sorry, we still had an old speakers list. Sally, if you remember what you.
Yeah, I was.
Okay. So is there any other discussion we had on this agenda point?
Oh.
Yes.
So yeah, full disclosure, I was on FinCom for CASA. I'd like to be a part of FinCom still, if everybody's okay with that. And then with this whole like disclosure thing, if anything comes up, I'll disclose it.
Alright, thank you.
Is everybody okay with that? Is there like, is anybody opposed to me being on CASA's FinCom? Yeah, they're finance committee.
Kemi and then Rory?
Yeah, I had a question on this point last time because weirdly, like maybe I didn't get it right, but you said that you resigned from this position and then you want to put it back again, or you never resigned and it's still there? I'm just confused.
This literally happened today. Once I saw there was a conflict of interest point, I was like, what could this be about, right? And then I figured, oh shit, it might be about the whole CASA thing. Because I didn't think at the time that there was a conflict of interest, but like with the points that were raised. So I sent an email to the CASA president literally during this meeting to say, hey, I'm resigning from finance committee so as not to...
Why not the chair?
Well, I mean, I can send it to you as well.
Sorry,
Anyway, yeah, so just to like, I wanted to be open about it, just to like let you all know this is a thing.
Do you have a follow-up?
Saw the agenda point that said conflict of interest. and you were concerned enough about your position on finance committee.
Just a reminder to address the chair, it's getting a little accusatory.
The finance coordinator was concerned enough about his position on the finance committee of another organization to proactively recuse himself and resign from that committee before knowing that that was going to be the topic of discussion relating to conflicts of interest.
Yeah, I'll give you a direct.
Yeah. Finance coordinator, finance committee, I felt that like maybe someone would feel that there's a conflict there, and I was just trying to like see, look, basically since September 20th, I've been just kind of paranoid about everything that I do, right? So I just wanted to make sure that everything's cool. I was going to bring it up regardless during the whole motion to be like, hey, full disclosure, I am or was on this. If everybody's okay with it, then I can continue. If not, then I've already sent my resignation.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more? Yes, Kemi?
I think, and maybe you let me feel in the room, if we already just passed a policy on having maybe like, well, thing disclosed in terms of what's related to the CSU, I don't feel like I have a problem with you being on the financial committee, but to be honest, I don't know what it includes being on the financial committee of CASA, so do you want to directly respond?
Yeah, so this whole academic year, fiscal year, nothing that CASA's finance committee has like approved or that has made decisions on relates to the CSU in any way. And I can provide minutes for all the finance committee meetings. It's literally just approving budgets for like the equivalent of like committees and associations. So yeah, and none of that like relates to the CSU in any way that I can think of. There might be like a couple of things in terms of like some collaborative projects between like one of the sustainable committees and the sustainability like staff, I think. Yeah, so like I'm not 100% sure on all that, but anyway, like I'm willing to like show all of this, and all the documents are public anyway. So.
Thank you, Rory.
I don't have any particular comments on whether the finance coordinator's position on CASA's finance committee is like de facto a conflict. Personally, I think it would be better to not merge those two roles. However, I would like to comment that what comes to mind when I think about this type of situation is something that happened last year when I was on CASA, which is CASA ran, and I mean Dylan or my fellow counselor might provide some clarification, but CASA held a joint frosh with ECA and with ASFA, and payments from CASA to those other organizations were delayed, and this was a cause of friction between CASA and ASFA and ECA. So in a situation like that, there's the potential for CASA to be withholding tens of thousands of dollars from another group in the university. Maybe it's the CSU next time. And that would be a serious issue where your loyalties, it's not just like, oh, I recused myself, but your loyalties to that organization versus your loyalties to this organization cause you to behave in a certain way. I would think to stay above board transparency-wise, it's going to be easier for you to not sit on finance committee on CASA and not have to report on anything that could potentially be in conflict. Because yes, those things are public, and if anyone does go and want to, policeman check, like, it's going to be hard, is my impression.
Thank you. Dylan?
From what I can understand with it, the only obligation of the executives right now is to disclose. It is their judgment or acting in best faith that they will be able to remove themselves from any possible situation of conflict, so I see no problem in them sitting on boards.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, also to follow on Dylan, and also a kind of thing for Rowan, I just think that if this is not against the rule, I mean, unless in that there is a specific rules in the bylaws that saying that executive cannot be sit on the other committees and stuff like that, we should be allowed for them to be sit on there. And then and unless the dean cannot do anything about it, but now they are able to finish their work, so it's actually okay though.
Thank you. Sule?
No, I understand. It's
Okay. So with that, there's no more speakers list on this agenda point. So we can move on to, I might have written the wrong thing, sorry, it's supposed to be Finance Coordinator Report, but I wrote Finance Committee Report. That was my mistake in the agenda. Rowan, Finance Coordinator Report.
I think Michaela's actually going to take this.
So yeah, in my perspective, this is not an adequate report, and this has become a pattern. This is also a note, it's not micromanaging. A counselor's job is to keep the executive accountable. And by the reports, I cannot see how the finance coordinator is filling up the time that they're being paid for. It doesn't seem like an appropriate amount of work that is being done for the role of coordinator, is my concern. And I would just like to state that in the report, the two things that have happened over the course of whatever amount of time since the last council meeting is that there's been one financial committee meeting, and the finance coordinator is currently working on a document that explains audited financial statements, which is not a lot. And I have two questions for the financial coordinator, which is why aren't you specifying what your projects are? Because you say that they're projects and they're projects here and there, but you're not saying what they are. And can you briefly name these projects?
Do you provide a direct response?
Yep, sure. Because we sent in our working plan for the year, I just assume that when I say project, it refers to that. What I have been working on since the last council, do you want me to do for the last month or since the last council,
What your projects are, because everybody else mentions
Okay.
what they are.
Sure. So my projects right now are working on a budget. So do you all remember the audit explanation thing? The multiple-page document that I wrote that explains the audit that runs everybody through it. Something like that, but for the CSU's budget, and not just their operating budget, but the whole thing entirely, right? So all the funds, where they come from, how they're calculated, what this is used for. It's a very in detail thing that I kind of got inspired by the way that Smooth did it on theirs, and they have a 48-page document breaking their budget and how it works out. I don't think that a 48-page document is necessary or that anybody would want to go through that, but I want to make something that's transparent for our stuff. But I also need the university to give me more information in terms of the fee levy reconciliations, how many students are actually in versus how many opted out, just a bunch of metrics for that. That's one thing. The other thing is a bunch of internal controls and processes. So making sure that I've worked on several Excel spreadsheets that make the job easier and so that there's not so much of a back and forth hassle with paper trail and stuff like that. So one of these documents is a credit card document, which every month that we have a credit card, it the finance coordinator has to put in all these, associate all the different things to the credit card, what each expense was, what it was for, and that's a very long and tedious process. But I worked on a way to make it much faster. Another thing that I've been working on is something similar, but for Rubik's statements. So every so often I get a bunch of emails that just say, hey, you have different items from Rubik's or from different suppliers as well, that cost about this much, and I still have to allocate them to a budget line depending on what they're for.
Great, thank you.
I can keep going if you want, but I didn't want to bore everybody with all the nitty-gritty of.
That's actually not my concern.
Okay.
Did you have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up. It's just, it's a follow-up comment. That's really great that that's all that you're working on, but we don't know that. And yes, you're supposed to say that what about your projects in the beginning of the year, but you have to explain what you're doing in that time. So how much of those projects have you been doing? Otherwise, we have nothing to see of what your role has been.
All right, thank you. Rowan and then Sule.
I motion that the finance coordinator report be resubmitted for the next regular council meeting.
Okay, do we have a second? I would say, do you have a motivation, Rowan?
I want to agree completely with Michaela. This is frankly just not a proper report. There are points that are one line. There are multiple points that are 2 lines. This is not what a report is meant to be. ridiculously short, it's ridiculously vague, and these projects are not expanded on at all, and even in the statement that the finance coordinator made, it just kind of like states a project. So for instance, the document simply, he stated that he was working on it. Well, he's been saying that he's been working on it since June when we were in finance committee, but there's no actual update in in any of his reports about like what's actually happening in it. Following that, I don't see why we're waiting on the university for information regarding our own budget. Like, there's just this general vagueness that doesn't actually add up, and I don't think that this is appropriate as a report at all, and I want it to be rewritten and resubmitted, actually outlining how the projects are going, what steps he is taking, because looking at this, I mean, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that he's actually doing his work, but like, there's nothing shown in this report.
Okay, thank you. So with the motion, we're on a new speakers list. Rory.
Please excuse me if this comes across as too, draconian, but could we get the finance coordinator to allocate his timesheet or his hours to tasks on his work plan? In a way of saying, like, on Monday when I was in the office from 1 until 5, I was working on project A. On Tuesday when I was in from 8 until 10, I did checks, I did my daily duties. So that there's maybe a way of accounting for that? Is that appropriate?
Wouldn't be my decision.
No,
Oh.
I know I look too good, but I turn my head around the room like this to sort of broad base everyone.
All right, so I see we have a bit of a speakers list building up. Sule, Awatif, Dylan, and then Reem.
Would people be open to me submitting like the drafts that I have so far, as well as like the outlines that I've been working on, as well? Or just, so like for all the projects that I've been doing, just like the information breakdown, it's gonna look very sloppy, I'm telling you that right now, but, or do you want me to just go into a lot more detail? So that's the thing is like, I'm not sure what the expectations were at the beginning of the year, and so I've been doing it kind of like this, but I can go into a lot more detail if need be. Well, which is,
do you want to direct respond, Rowan?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think what a report is a pretty simple concept. You state what you're working on, you state what's already happened, you state whether or not it's gone well, you describe what's next to do. If it's finished, you provide closing statements, etc. Like, this isn't super complicated. We're in November. The executives have been expected to submit 1, 2, 3, this is the 4th if I count correctly. Like, this should have been figured out already. I've already submitted a warning to the executives a month ago stating that these were not up to, like, these reports were not proper reports, and the finance coordinators was one of them last time as well. Like, I don't think this is very complicated, and I mean, only 2 of the reports have been pulled for this purpose, so like, obviously it's not something super complicated that no one's figured out yet. Like, a lot of the other executives have figured this out, and there's been no reach out before November, 8th, to see how to write a report. Like, it's pretty simple. It's just expanding on, actually explaining what you're doing in your job, because here that's simply not happening.
Right, thank you. So I have Sule, Awatif, Dylan, Reem, and Sally.
yeah, well, mine could have just been a point of information. So you want me to resubmit this one for the next November council? Okay.
What's the motion?
Okay, Awatif.
Yes, 2 things. I echo what Rowan has just described about how a report should look like. I mean, easy way to do it, just look at the other reports submitted by the other executives. One of the reports that I personally like is Layla's report. So you can go through that and you can get an idea. And in response to the suggestion made by Rory, I do not think we should do that. I mean, that's too much micromanaging. That's too much. I feel that that's oppressive. If we are to do it for one executive, we'll have to do it for the rest of the executives. It shouldn't be limited to one executive. And I don't agree with it at all.
Okay, thank you. Dylan?
Rescind.
Reem? Sally? Right, so if there's no more speakers list, then we can move to a vote. So all those in favor of having the finance coordinator resubmit their report next meeting, please raise your placards. 12, all those opposed, 0, and any abstentions? 1, 2. Perfect, so that carries. We had a speakers list before the motion, which was Rowan, Soulé, and Rory. So I don't know if any of you still have relevant points? Okay, perfect. So then we can move on to Sustainability Coordinator, not committee report. Rowan.
I motion that this report be resubmitted for the following regular council meeting.
Okay, do we have a second? Michaela, your motivation, Rowan?
Sure. Again, I don't think this report is adequate. I'm frankly concerned by the little amount of work that's actually described in this report. Listed in the report are 2 collab events, and the only actual work that the sustainability coordinator describes themselves doing in this report is designing the game. And I'm not trying to criticize the idea of designing the game. I think the same way that an executive could design a workshop, they could design a game like this. I think that's fine, but there's 2 events that are described, and it's this is the only work that was put together. And then the final and only other point that's mentioned is the campus engagement subcommittee, without any actual discussion of what is this committee. I don't know. What's it working towards? What is the sustainability coordinator's role in this committee? And it's these are the only 3 things listed in this report. I'm frankly simply hoping that there's actually more that's been done by this coordinator. And I think that if you take out the long description of the game, this report is under a page. Most of it describing collaboration events without actually describing the sustainability coordinator's role within these events. So I think that it's appropriate that this one be resubmitted with further detail. And again, I have given warning to the executives already, that reports were not up to scruff. None of them reached out to me to ask if I was referring to theirs, or if there's anything, or at least these 2 didn't reach out to me. Maybe one of the others, I don't remember, but to see if there was more that they could do. And I simply don't find that this report is acceptable.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion to be had on the motion? Okay, so we can move to a vote. So all those in favor of having the sustainability coordinator resubmit the report by next council meeting, please raise your flag. 9. All those opposed? 0. And any abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect. So that carries. All right. So there's nothing more in business substantive. So we'll move on to question period and business arising. That's for announcements. We'll go around. Rory, the floor is yours.
I sent so business arising from this meeting. Some councillors had identified things that had happened in some of the earlier agenda points. Let me try and be brief with this. So I've come up with a motion. It's a little bit long. Please bear with me. Can I make it?
Yeah,
okay.
It wasn't a motivation.
And I did send it to Caitlin, so the text could be posted.
Yeah, I'll put it in the group, but go ahead.
Fair warning, it's verbose. Be it resolved, until the CSU formally establishes bylaws concerning legal signing authority, rights to bind the organization or commit the CSU in writing or otherwise to enter any agreement, contracts, publicly or privately commit the CSU or its name in any fashion, no executive officer or director of the corporation shall perform the above or imply in any fashion to external parties that they have such authority without express approval by council at a duly convened council meeting.
Okay, do we have a second? Soulé, your motivation, Rory?
So this is basically because we identified that there's a missing part of our bylaws that stipulates specifically who can sign the CSU's signature on something, a contract, we're going to support this, etc., etc. We need this. So until then, this is warning anyone in this room not to do it, because it's happened twice. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, speakers list goes Peter, Soulé, and then Rowan. Peter?
Yeah, just have a question. Is this for the question period?
Yes. Well, right now we're on the motion, and then it'll be more questions. So right now, everything we're talking about relates to what Rory just said. Okay. So if you have a question, I can put you back on after. Okay, Soulé?
Iverson.
Okay, Rowan?
Yeah, I like this motion. Like Rory said, this is something that has happened twice now, and I want to make clear for everyone in the room discussing the huge motion where like the signature was like dependent on council's approval, because there was never a motion, and the chair can correct me if I'm wrong, because there's never a motion, council has not actually signed off on this. Council has not given its approval, and as of right now, the CSU is not currently like an endorser or whatever of this campaign.
Yeah, I just had a question. It might be stupid, but what does without express approval mean?
Without express approval, let me find the, so express approval is us, like, council knowing, acknowledging, and giving our permission for that person to approve something. So us passing a resolution, passing a motion that, you know, says yes, we agree to, like us agreeing to something does not mean that you can go and sign with an organization that says we agree to that. See the difference?
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes. And what happens if, let's say, I think this was brought up during the time we were talking about the declaration. What happens if something needs to be signed before we have a meeting?
Okay, so based in the bylaws, so during this meeting I went and checked the bylaws, and there is that decree. The decree allows the general coordinator to exercise the duties, like the abilities or the rights of council in those types of emergency circumstances. So what would happen then legally is he would make this decree that he approves or agrees this on council's behalf, which would then take the place of us expressly agreeing to it.
Okay, just for, go ahead.
Do you want to add that to your motion?
That clause is already in the bylaws, so if a situation like that happened, it would be covered by that clause. Do you feel it needs to be there explicitly? I mean, do you think it should be there?
I think so.
If you want to ponder it, we can come back as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Friendly amendment if you want to make it.
Omar?
I just want to say, is this taking a position, or this includes, for example, an administrative service contract? So for example, if it's like a software that we're buying, or we're getting a service.
If you're binding the organization in writing to an agreement or a contract, like you signing, perfect example is you signing for the daycare. Right at the bottom, your signature goes on that sheet of paper. But you could not have signed that sheet until council said, yes, we agree to this contract. Now, you brought that contract to council first, like, good job, what you're supposed to do, but without this, you could have just signed it and been like, yep, I approve. I'm the CSU.
Follow?
So if it's to, let's say, a license of software, you have to sign the purchase agreement. Is that something that to be brought to council?
If you're signing something,
So is that
yes.
Okay, that's all.
Okay. Michaela? I swear I saw black. Okay. Ali?
Yeah, I would really like what Alatif was saying to be put at the end, specifically as a reminder that the other one exists. So like whenever someone is reading that, they wouldn't just stop there and go like, oh, this is it. They would at least have like a, see this, for example, or whatever next to the motion.
Thank you. Awatu?
Yeah, I only mentioned that because I forgot to read the first two sentences. This motion actually just asks us to write a bylaw, and in that bylaw we can add what I was asking for and what you were asking for. This is just a motion. Maybe policy committee could work on this bylaw.
Thank you. Omar?
So just a clarification for Rory.
Yeah.
So for example, if there's a purchase that needs to be done tomorrow for, let's say, $500 arbitrarily, and you need to sign the purchase agreement.
Does it come under your duties already? Does it expressly come under your duties right now?
It may or may not. Like if it
does,
doesn't, not
if
for
it doesn't,
myself,
it's
but for
okay,
someone
but
else.
otherwise legally you're signing something that the corporation hasn't agreed to.
So let's say if it's something administrative, like let's say for example,
If it's
we're getting
administrative, it's part of your duties.
Okay, we're getting into a little bit hypothetical as well, so I'm going to cut that short. Rowan?
I would just also like to point out that the CSU already has like standing regulations surrounding like purchasing policy and a lot of that, which would cover a lot of this, and describes like under $10,000 the finance coordinator is allowed to make this decision at this between 10 and 50 it has to go to finance committee, et cetera, and outlines a lot of it.
Sorry.
Yeah, again, very good point from Awatif. Just to identify that first sentence or two, it's until the CSU formally establishes bylaws about this, don't do it. So if we already have some bylaws that talk about situations like finance or like other things, we've already established them, so you can do them, right? Like it's exclusionary from this motion. This is just, it's a gap. It's saying for the gaps that exist, don't do it until we fill the gap. Don't drive your car, there's a pothole. Wait. I don't know.
Okay, is there any more discussion to be had on this motion? Yes, Layla.
There's just, I think it would be important if this motion is to pass to also then formalize that these bylaws are created, so referring it to policy committee or having some kind of action plan. If there's a gap established, it should actually, there should be a plan to fill it permanently. And secondly, I understand the spirit of this motion. There are just some aspects of it that still remain a little unclear about to what extent things that fall within, for example, individual executives' mandates are to be interpreted. For example, a position that is in line with both our positions book, our annual campaign, such as CUTE, I think with a certain degree of understanding of what our mandates are, it is not going against any of our obligations as the CSU or in Ahmed's position, the external coordinator, to offer support for a campaign that shares a mandate that we already have. I understand there's a situation specific here within the motion that was around the question of the strike, and I agree that needs to be clarified. But I can think of many, many situations in which I personally had to sign for things over the summer related to orientation that I feel like I could just as easily be called up on in this situation as not having come to council for approval of, say, a band that played at orientation. I realize that sounds a bit silly, but I just think that it would be important to clarify exactly what we're saying when we say sign on. Is it support in any way? Is it promote in any way? Is it endorsing? I just want to be very clear about this because I think it's a bit of it could create a bit of a kind of slippery slope to then decide how executives and potentially councillors are going about their mandates and whether things fall within their obligations or not.
Thank you. Awatif and then Rory.
I resent.
Rory?
No, it's a very good point that Layla's brought up. Obviously, the situation right now creates a slippery slope to begin with. The fact that we don't have anything right now, we're already sliding down a slope. And we're already having issues come up where we're questioning specific situations as to how far down the slope they are. Specifically with this, my intent was to say, for the bylaws that don't exist already, so if there's something under your mandate, within the policies, within, the finance thing was a perfect example. You signing a band for orientation is within your job, 100%. That's not you committing to CSU. That's you fulfilling your job. That's your position approving something. Your position approving something isn't the same as saying the CSU is doing this, or the CSU is approving a daycare, or approving a stance on X, Y, and Z. Positions, if there's new positions brought to council, before they go in the positions book, they're approved at council, right? Any one person can't just say, oh, the CSU takes a position on this. If it's something we've already agreed to and it's within your mandate, of course you can. So it's just that, I've lost the rest of the train of what I was going to say, but anyway.
Thank you. Ahmed?
Just to clarify the question of CUTE, and the point where they mentioned they are calling for a strike. First of all, CUTE is not unionized. They aren't a student association in any mean. They aren't provincial student association. They are a community group. I would like to clarify this, even if it's not related to the motion, but I just want to clarify why I did, because it's portion of my mandate, because I'm working on paid internship as the annual campaign. CUTE is a community group that is, right now it's a Montreal community group, and they are trying to expand. They are trying to go outside Montreal by endorsing or forming CUTE. Gatineau, if I'm not mistaken, they formed CUTE Concordia, which is working with them. Any member here on the table can be If they are activists and they can commit to a certain work, they can go and be a member with them. And thirdly, the CSU isn't a member with them. The CSU is just supporting them, financially supporting them in terms of sharing and promoting their events. And thirdly, fourthly, if Kyoto is calling for a general strike, an open strike, and CSU is supporting them, that doesn't mean that CSU has to go on strike because they are striking, because again, CSU is not obligated. We don't have any obligation toward them. That's what I want to clarify. So my endorsement was just support to to have an equal criteria for all internships.
Thank you. Sule?
Iverson, Rurikan, so.
Live, Rowan, and then Atwatif on the speakers list. Rowan?
Yeah. Just to respond to Layla's comment and kind of build off something that was said, the CSU standing regulations stipulate that contracts require the signature of 2 signing officers, which can be signed off by the authorized approvers. So in the example that the student life coordinator gave of like a ban for orientation, since she is the authorized approver for the orientation budget line, she could form that contract and simply have it signed by the signing officers and go forward from there, and it would fall under these standing regulations and thus not the motion that's on the table currently.
Thank you. Awazir?
I understand.
Okay, so there's nothing else on the, there's no one else on the speakers list currently. So if there's nothing more, we can move to a vote. So all those in favor of Rory's motion, please raise your placards. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All those opposed? 0. And any abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. So that carries. And we're back in general question period and business arising. So Peter and then Sule.
Yeah, so just have a concern for all the councils, because I know that for sure in the December's last meeting that I won't be able to make it because I have a class thing that I have to go to it. So if possible, I wanted to ask for excuse now in case that we have a lot of things to do, like in the November next one. So just I wanted to, if possible, to have a vote.
Yes. Basically, it's for the future months. Basically.
No, for the December one, because I know we only have 2 more left.
Yeah.
So the November one should be fine, but just for the December one, because for sure December one I cannot come. So I just wanted to ask if you now, in case we have a lot to do in the next one.
Thank you. Sally?
I want to talk after the question.
Okay. I mean, there's no motion on the table right now. So it's, the floor is yours. Okay, do we have a second? Kemi, so all those in favor of excusing Peter from next meeting, please raise your placards.
December.
Oh, December, okay. 11, all those opposed, and any abstentions? 0, okay, so that carries, and I will note it. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to the rest of the speakers list, which goes
Point of personal privilege.
Yep.
Can I be sure to have like a completely gluten-free meal next time? Because like I feel like I might just like randomly puke because of the wrap.
Oh, okay.
If possible.
Who can whoever deals with food,
Yeah,
please
sorry
ensure
for
that?
being like out of it today. Like that's kind of what's been going on in my stomach.
Okay. Yeah. Just a reminder: everyone did submit their food intolerances at the beginning of the year. So if we could keep that in mind when buying food, that would be excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. Kemi? Or your, okay. Sally?
Also for food, can you bring guys coffee? Like how does it work?
Yes.
Because we stay very late and we're sleepy.
Does anyone have a response, Omar?
Sorry, did you ask if we could bring coffee?
Yeah.
Absolutely, we can bring it for next council.
Like every council?
Yeah, every council meeting.
Great. Okay, any more questions? Oh yes, Okay.
Yeah, last council meeting, like I did like a motion concerning the HVAC system at Concordia, and there's still like complaints about from students about this issue, and like I would like to that the HVAC is working for students to study. So I just want to push this like forward to find to find a solution about this. So yeah.
Rory and then Ali.
So I think, not to mandate asthma, but I would think that asthma would definitely be able to work with you to like talk with facilities management, and see what they can do to open that up. I know from JMSB, I've tried to advocate for that before, with classrooms that you can't change it, and even a professor complaining, my classroom is freezing in the winter, students can't write, didn't get much action. But I'm wishing you guys all the best.
Thank you. So I have a speakers list of Reem and then Omar. Oh, sorry, Ali, Reem, and then Omar. Sorry.
I think because we didn't have Senate ever since you brought up the motion. So I think we can bring that up in Senate this week, because finally we do. So I think we can bring it up since it has something to do with academics and stuff like that. So.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was wondering if like a petition will be, will be a good option to put on the table for this. If maybe students does like petitions, I think maybe the administration will like hurry up to put this process.
Omar, I'll let you respond to it.
So I don't think this is something that has to go to Senate. That being said, I can work with you on it to speak with facilities. I know you mandated asthma. I'm not sure if
I didn't mandate asthma.
Okay, it wasn't a motion. So I would like to take that on, just given that I am able to do that and I'm aware of how, like what the process is. So we can work together. Like I am sorry that, there was no follow-up since the last meeting. So thanks for bringing it up. We can work on it next week. We can meet with anyone that's responsible in facilities. If a petition is needed, that can necessarily be done. I'm not sure how much Senate can mandate facilities to do something.
Okay, thank you. Reem?
Just to clarify, this is about the HVAC system not working in the labs?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
not in the labs, but
okay, just information, like I did try to pursue this personally last year, and I talked to facilities, and their just simple response was that we're trying to save energy, we're trying to like be economic, something like that, and this is how it is. So, yeah.
Thank you. Your next speakers list?
Oh, I just wanted to say that. Sorry, I said all my response.
Oh, okay. Rory, was that a?
Yeah, it was just my recommendation that like before you not waste your time, but before you take your time going around getting a petition, like sometimes there are actual like good reasons why things can't be done, like they just can't be. So if you find out and they're like, yeah, it can't because the system won't allow it or whatever it is, it's different from we don't want to, which now we have that insight. So yeah, but if they're like it's to save energy, you can argue that with them.
Thank you. Omar?
I think what I suggested to do with Ahmed is to actually get like, it's like, information gathering, just to see how the HVAC system works, why they can't do it, and so on. And once we've gotten information, I think that's for yourself and anyone else that's interested to see if that's enough information or enough reason for the fact why they can't change, if they're like, it's because of money or anything like that. I don't think that's acceptable, but there might just be like logistical aspects that are impossible to change. So there's limitations as well.
okay.
Okay. Yes, Camille?
Yeah, so I think it's a good point that Rory brought about like before you're kind of like taking time into it to just see if like they don't want to or it's just because they can't. But I think a petition will be a good, I think it will have some good weight, so.
Okay, so we're still on the topic of business arising and questions. Yes, Sule?
Has anybody seen the sign-in sheet? Because I don't think it made its way.
Veronica?
Because I think it went that way for a bit, but we
Oh,
never.
wait, oh, there we go.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Asma?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming along. Yeah, that's fine. It's only if you miss 90 minutes of council that you need an excusal.
I just wanted to determine, so was that sent to me or was that?
I didn't mandate anyone.
Yeah, nothing
Was that suggestion?
Yeah, it was just to connect you two together and say like your advocacy.
We could fall under different roles. We can student life, we can do GC, we could do anything.
When you were out of the room, Omar took it.
Okay, awesome. All right, glad that's resolved. I saw another placard around. Devin, was that you?
Oh, no, sorry, that was just about the signage.
Oh, yeah. Sally?
If it's 12, like midnight, we can leave, right? Even if it's like after 90 minutes, like in the future, just for information.
I don't think that's codified in the standards. I think that's an ASFA regulation.
No, it is.
It is? Okay.
After midnight,
Okay.
After
Sorry.
midnight,
My mistake.
okay.
I think I saw something else around here. Okay, so then we can move, yes, Rowan? Okay, we haven't done announcements yet, and I know that there's likely some. Okay, I'll just go around this way because I know that a lot of people have stuff to say. Maybe they don't. Layla?
Yeah, special project funding deadline is November 25th. Anyone can get projects funded, so if you know someone with a project or you have a project, you can apply. It's all on the CSU website. I'm going to host an information session next Wednesday afternoon from 3 to 4. But you can also make an appointment with me or tell people to make appointments with me. It's a really great, accessible, and very few guidelines funding opportunity. So anyone who has any kind of thing they want to see happen. It's also great for people who have like ideas of stuff they want to make larger in the future. It's a really good way to start. Tell all of your friends. I also have extra posters in the office if people want to come by and grab some to poster specific